see you do a little training for us, and we'll do that, and then we'll jump into dinner and the rest of the meeting. So, Mark McDermott.
So I'm holding up dinner. They didn't tell me that. My name is Mark McDermott. I'm from Lynn Blackman and Toohey. I've been on Zoom meetings with many of you. I've been presented to some of you before. It's nice to see everybody again. For those of you that don't know me, I've been with Pietro's firm for a couple years. And before that, I was HR director and legal for the Champlain Valley School District. And before that, on every single school board that was involved in the Champlain Valley School District, including chair of the school. So I appreciate what you all do and the amount of time and pressure you're under, especially these days as school board members. So thank you for your service. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about board roles and responsibilities and the open meeting law. This is an overview. I'm not going to be able to answer all of your questions this evening, but just to give an idea of what school boards have the power to do, what they don't have the power to do, and get into a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis and things you might run across as a board. So let's start here. Let's back into what you can do. What don't you do? Well, there's a lot of authority embedded in your electorate. People who elect you, they do certain things. They vote for your moderators, they vote for your clerks, they vote for you, they approve your budgets. So there's power in the electorate that you represent. And that power is embedded in them and not in the board, right? So sometimes the board is going to the electorate to ask them to approve their budget or to be reelected. So that's power embedded in the electorate. Oh yeah, sorry.
I have to leave though.
I thought I. Bob wanted me to hurry up because the next slide is about what the superintendent can do. How about the superintendent? So you hire the superintendent. He's sort of the CEO of the district, right? So the superintendent carries out the policies that you adopt. You charge the superintendent. You say, we adopt this policy, you make it happen. Prepare your educational goals, your curriculum, that sort of thing. Empower his staff to do those things that are supposed to run the school district. Employment, he nominates licensed candidates to the board. Those are your teachers, your principals. Anybody that requires a license gets nominated to the board, and you take a vote on that person. Unlicensed professionals in your districts, your food service workers, your custodians, your parents, your paraeducators, those are embedded in the superintendent as the hiring authority. Now, he can delegate that down to his directors and whatnot, but that's where that authority lies. He can fire licensed and unlicensed employees. Now, licensed employees will have an option under statute and maybe under your CBAs to bring a hearing to you and talk about that when we get there.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can you speak up just a little bit more?
Yes, of course. I've never been asked to do that. My kids usually tell me to be quiet. That's true too. Again, the superintendent is providing you, he's helping you develop your budgets, he's helping you develop your curriculum. Okay, now we get to what you actually, under statute, have the authority to do. You're determining the educational policies of the district. You adopt policies all the time, right? In your board meetings. You probably have a policy committee on some of your things. And they're bringing policies to you to adopt. And you have to do certain things when you do that, right? Those policies need to come to a board meeting, they need to be talked about, they need to be warned 10 days in advance before you're talking about them. That's all in statute. But those policies are yours, and you have the authority to adopt them. There's also you can approve and disapprove of rules and regulations of the entire district. Some of that is coming to you from the superintendent. You don't need to do some of that, but if something comes up, you have authority to interfere there. So this is a funny paragraph in the statute that the board can take any action that is required for the sound administration of the school district. I'm staring at the screen because the words mean a lot there. Any action, that's a lot. You can take any action for sound administration of the school district. So that's a definition. That's the box you're inside. What does that mean? You know, some of it's pretty easy, right? We need to expand a building. We need to approve some more positions. Okay, that's in your box. But when you get outside that, if you have questions, you can find out if it's an enforceable action by asking the Secretary of Education. And they have ultimate authority to say, oh yeah, that's a sound, you can do that. That fits within the definition. Honestly, I've never been through that process. Never had a board that's been that far outside of what we thought their authority was, but it does exist and it's in statute. Okay, so statute, here's some duties and powers that are not optional. You manage the real estate of the district, your buildings, your fields, financial controls and budgets. You have your budgets, you have auditors. These are all board authority and board things you have to do to make sure that your educational system is running correctly. Submit a budget to the electorate. I'm sure none of you have ever thought about that. Authorize short-term borrowing. That can be bonding for buildings, that can be your TAN authority. But again, that's going to the electorate, that's part of your warnings. You can apply for grants, sometimes that's through the superintendent, sometimes that's through a board. Inform parents of the right to opt out of student information. This is something that's on your websites. This is a FERPA requirement that is taken care of by your administration. School choice notification, again, this is something that the board is charged to the board, but it's usually taken care of by your administration. Yeah, I know it's on your websites because I've seen it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this last one. Making school facilities available to other folks. This seems like a fairly simple thing to do. Your local rec department wants to use your basketball court. Your Boy Scouts want to use, I guess they're just scouts now. Your scouts want to use a meeting room, right? Once you open that door, who can you say no and yes to? You're a public building. As soon as you start saying yes to a lot of people, it's harder to say no to somebody you don't. So, we talk about this a lot because it comes up a lot. And facility policies, I'm pretty sure the VSBIT has one that's on their website. Consider who you want to use your buildings, why they're there, do they need insurance? This is important stuff. It's stuff that needs to come from the board because your administration needs to cover when they're saying, yes, you can come use our buildings, or no, you can't. Do not use language that implicates constitutional rights. You can't say we can't say we're going to open our buildings, but not to the local youth Christian. It doesn't work that way. So the policy is content neutral. So the policy doesn't speak in those political terms. It just lays out a neutral policy. And again, this has come up a number of times. There's rules and regulations and statute about gun shows in schools, or that sort of thing. But something to think about as you're going through your policies, and something that comes to us a lot from schools. Okay, hiring and firing issues. So Bonnie, board chair. She's the board chair. She decides she's going to sit on a committee to hire a new principal. Superintendent has, with the hiring committee, decided on this one person. Bonnie isn't so sure and likes this other person. So the superintendent nominates the person he wants. Bonnie convinces the board not to hire them and says, no, we should hire this person. Is that the correct series of events there? We can take.
No.
See, it's good. No, and why is that? Because it's the superintendent's job to bring you the nomination. There's a whole process that gets you to that nomination, right? That principal, that person, that hire has gone through a committee, not just one person. So we've skipped a step. And Bonnie here, is she acting as board chair when she's on that hiring committee? Right, she's a member of the committee. She may be a board representative. Every principal committee might have a board representative, something like that, but she's a member of another group, and it's that committee. Again, this happens more than usual. So boards get, one of your responsibilities as a board is sometime to act in a quasi-judicial function, to hold a hearing. And one of the big reasons that comes up is in firing under some statutes. Principals, superintendents, and teachers are allowed, if they've been fired for just cause, are allowed to come to you under statute and under your CBAs to have what is called a quasi-judicial hearing. And we're going to talk about quasi-judicial hearings because it happens not just here, but in other matters as well. So the reason we have these hearings is because these folks have due process rights that's given to them by your statutes and by your CBAs. These people come to you, they have a right of the allegations against them. Why were they fired? They have a right to see evidence. They have a right to present evidence. They have a right to a determination. So boards, when you get to these hearings, you're writing something afterwards that says, we have decided X because of these facts. Sign the board. And they're entitled to an impartial fact finder. So when we're going to these hearings, we want to know as little as possible before we get there. So you're acting as a court by adjudicating these rights. They're conducted under these due process rights that we were just talking about. They have the right to present, they have the right to know what's the charges against them. It sounds like law and order, kind of is a little bit. So when you're in the hearing, there's decorum. The parties can speak, but nobody else. The public isn't there for these things, right? They don't get to watch a teacher go through what might be the worst moment in their life, right? That's no fun. And there's statutes that define if the public can come, and that's usually because the person who's requested the hearing waives that right and says, no, I want the public to see this. All right, and here are some other quasi-judicial matters that come up. Residency hearings. I know that happens in this district quite a bit. So a person says they live in your town, but you don't think they do, and they want the rights to use school choice of your town. That happens, especially in the mountain towns. There's a hearing that's held before the board. If it gets that far, right, it goes to the superintendent, comes to the board, and you hold that same type of hearing. The family is allowed to be heard, the administration presents their side, and the board makes a decision. And then those folks have an appeal right to the Agency of Education. Probably, as far as quasi-judicial hearings go, it's student discipline matters, and then residency hearings, and then teacher firings. It's kind of the quantities that we see come to us asking for help. Expulsion hearings. This is student discipline. Your principals, who are doling out discipline, your superintendents who are handing out discipline to students who have violated the policies that you've adopted for a long-term suspension or expulsion have to come to you to have that approved. And those families, if they choose, get to have a hearing about whether their child is going to be expelled. And you make a decision. Held in private, again, especially when it's student hearings, right? You don't even want to know the name of the students if you can avoid it. We're using student numbers, something like that. And again, using the due process that we've laid out. This is when you come to these processes, it's worth a phone call to somebody like me just to say, hey, we're going through this. Can you at least lay out the process for us? So we're not making a misstep. All right, so you have some authorities. You have things that you don't do. You have quasi-judicial functions, which I'm sure are your favorite. So what does that all mean? So you're responsible for school district governance. That's the policies. Okay? High student expectations, high school graduation requirements. Create conditions in the district for student staff and success. You're overseeing a district. You've hired a CEO to run that district. If it's not going well, what do you do about it? Holding administration accountable. That's what we do about it. And how do you do that? It's through an evaluation process. And community engagement. This is sometimes forgotten, right? We don't always love when the whole community shows up at our board meetings because it can be a mess. But that engagement is part of the process. You want to hear from you represent those communities. They elected you. Having them involved is part of you and part of what you need to do. How do we manage administration? So you have the power, and you should have a superintendent evaluation process. And it should be followed. You should have it written out, and your superintendent should be involved in putting that together. So that evaluation, the goals you set up, the expectations, the measures, the metrics, the hardest part of any evaluation is knowing what the metrics are to signify success or failure and how you measure those. Regular feedback. This sounds like I'm giving an HR speech, and I am a little bit. That feedback from the board to the superintendent is really important through your board chairs, through if you have an evaluation committee. That's really important. Consider 360 evaluations from your administration for your superintendent. These are an important way to get a read of what's going on in the district. It's not the only way, right? You see how things operate, but that's important for the feedback. Consider input from families. This is the comma, but not just the ones who are motivated to speak publicly, right? It's always hard to get a real read from families because the only people who are motivated to speak out are usually unhappy. But sometimes they have a point. Maybe they're unhappy and 10 other families aren't speaking out, but there's a balance there that you need as a board to put into perspective. And obtain your input from your superintendent. This is a collaborative process, right? Again, you're empowering the superintendent to make your vision come to life. And that's a collaborative process, not just one. So one of your board policies, it's in every school across the state, lays out how complaints get to the board, right? I think it's your policy B50. That allows families to make a complaint to a principal. If they're not happy there, bring it to the superintendent. If they're not happy there, get to you. Now, this isn't a quasi-judicial hearing situation. This is a complaint. Now, It may turn into quasi-judicial if it turns into a complaint against an employee that turns serious. Put that to one side. What are the advantages and disadvantages of this? And I'm throwing that out to you. I'll start with an advantage, which is that's part of your connection to the community, right? This is the ultimate hearing from your community. Your ultimate response to your community is your hearings. What are the disadvantages here? Who's going to take the most advantage of this type of thing? Don't be shy. Yeah. And are they always right? Or do they always have a complaint that fits with what should be coming to you to start with, something you can actually fix? Yeah, right? So when there's a chain of command, and one of the things that I think is really important for boards to understand, and this happened to me all the time too, you go to the grocery, you're out getting gas, and a parent that you know knows you're on the board, comes over and talks to you about something that's happening or whatever. You know, listen, but point them to the principal. Listen, but point them to the teacher, right? Your role isn't to solve that problem right there. Your role as a board, even a public comment when a complaint comes up, that's only being heard for the first time at your meeting. Your role right then isn't to solve that problem. It's to point people in a way to get them through the chain of command before it gets to you. Because you've hired a superintendent who's hired his team to handle these things. If something is getting to you, it should be really broken or really unsolvable in some way. This doesn't really have an answer. What is the standard review of the board of these issues that come to you? Usually, we would say you're starting from scratch. You're hearing everything. That's kind of the quasi-judicial function part of it. What I think is this is a situation by situation complaint process. You all of a sudden get 3 complaints about one teacher who's falling asleep in the classroom. And for some reason, the principal and the superintendent have brushed it off. It doesn't sound like something that would happen, but go. And that comes to you. You can do something about that right away, right? You know, you can direct your superintendent to do an evaluation process, to see if the teacher needs help medically or something. But if it's someone is coming to you with a complaint about the way an IEP is being implemented, that's not really your role. There are other places to point that family in that process. So something to think about as parents come to you either individually or come to the board. What are they complaining about? What can you actually do about it? What should you do about it? I didn't put this here, but it's my favorite one. Conflicts of interest. So whenever something comes before the board, a person or an issue, they should be able to be talked about in a way that nobody at the table has a personal interest in the outcome. Now, we live in small town Vermont. We have a personal interest in how our school operates. We have a personal interest in whether the school is still standing. That's not what we're talking. Conflict of interest means a situation when a board member's private interests, as distinguished from their interest as a member of the public, would benefit from or be harmed by the actions as a board member. There is not a conflict of interest police department that comes in and scoots somebody away. There's a lot of trust in your boards to make this happen. Your board chair should be made aware if you believe a conflict of interest exists with another board member so that a conversation can take place. If it's you that has the conflict of interest, you should be reflecting on whether you should be recusing yourself from a situation. A contract comes up for the copiers in the school and your family owns the copy shop. You should not be voting on that contract, right? you shouldn't even know the bid process for that type of situation. Here, this is a trickier one. So if you're a teacher and you live in town, you can't sit on this school board if you're teaching in that school, but if you're a teacher from a different town, you could be on the school board. Is negotiations a conflict of interest for that person? My answer is usually yes, because negotiations are sort of a statewide issue. One thing that happens in one town influences the others, but it's also not my decision. It's the decision of So there's an appearance of a conflict. We raise the issue and describe it publicly, right? We're acknowledging that this is here. Explain why it is or isn't a conflict under the definition. And conflicted board members should not participate in the discussions or the votes on anything that they're conflicted on. Yes?
So I've been through a lot of these.
Yes, because they're squishy.
Right. And they're, no, it's very good because it's always interesting to have a different person presenting it.
Yeah.
It's many opinions. But I've always been told, or I think I've always been under the impression that the only person to determine if there's a conflict is that person who may be conflicted.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately.
Like we can't as a board say, Dan, you've got a conflict, we're voting you off this.
That's right. You can't.
It just, it
Yeah.
almost sounds like.
No. You as boards have to hold your members responsible for each other.
Yeah, but there's not.
You're right. The enforcement mechanism doesn't exist, except that board member takes the vote on the copier contract. Sure, the board isn't only responsible, but the person who lost out on the copier contract is. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. This is especially important for board members with children in schools. When your principal sees you walk in, you're walking in as a board member or as a parent? Why are you there? Right? So those roles need to be really separate. You have somewhat power over a principal by sitting on the board. However, you are a parent, and that's your role in that situation when you're going to talk. So we need a clear delineation between the role of board and role of parent or community member. Board members should understand their perceptions of their authority, right? People think that person who's talking to me or you at the gas station thinks you have the ability to snap your fingers and make something happen. They really do. A lot of people think a single board member can do a lot. So just be cognizant of that, especially when you're talking to school employees. So board members should limit interactions with administration outside of meetings on board issues. Single point of contact for information. So we, on our boards, and obviously this is just how we operate, there's many different ways to do this, but any communication from the board or board members to the superintendent were funneled through the board chair. Or when they got sick of it, we nominated somebody else to be that point of contact. But so that they knew that this was a board issue coming from a board or to your principal in your school. Okay? The danger is that there will be confusion about the member's role and that our impartiality and fairness will be questioned. So let's not fall into that trap whenever we can. Okay? I actually experienced this. I walked into, I was board chair at my local school when we were a local school district, and I walked in and my child had an issue, but it involved policy. And a policy that was actually being talked about a lot. And he raised his head and he said, "Are you here as the parent or as the board member?" It's the first time I ever really, I had a good relationship with the principal, so I knew he knew he could ask me that without fear or anything, but it's the first time I sort of new to my position, kind of had this ding, oh yeah, let's not make his job harder. There's no reason.
Hey, before you move on, can you go back to the other question?
Why, you want to be conflicted out of things too?
Just a comment. So let's say there's the 5 of us here for the board.
Yep.
And we're gonna have a hearing about whatever, and we think he's got a conflict, and we raise that, you know? So, and then, say it was a student issue, and it's his cousin's kid or something, and, you know, they're really close, they have dinner Sunday night. You know, he's been talking about this at the dinner table, and we really feel like there's a conflict between the 4 of us. But he says, no, there is no conflict, there is no conflict. And we've raised that. I mean, is there any, you know, he's the only one that can accuse himself, we can't all vote him off the island. But what, is there any recourse as a board for that?
Other than what you described, having that conversation with this really naughty board member down here again, that's the part of, especially in small, look, you live in small towns. Every kid that comes to you for a disciplinary hearing, you know in some way, right? Or you know their family in some way. It's just unavoidable. However, it's the impartiality that becomes really important. Can you take on that case and be completely impartial with the knowledge in your head? I think that person should conflict himself out of that particular thing. However, they may think to themselves, no, I can take this seriously without, but I would definitely
Just be more time.
Yeah. It's the time. Yeah, and again, it's a tricky issue for those exact reasons. Because you're relying on board members to police themselves.
It just seems like my first several years on board, we never really had anything like that. And it seems to be more and more of that coming up.
Yeah.
As we progress.
Yeah, and do you all, and I don't recall if it says it's the VSBA ethics, do you guys sign that, the VSBA ethics? I forget, take that seriously, when you sign it, and think about it when you're having these hearings, because yes, it may not be a problem for you while you're sitting there, but, contract issue, which was far too simple, it could be an issue for the board if things go south. So just things like that. Okay, this comes in. Tony Tight-Fisted is a board member. The board voted to approve the budget for a vote. Tony is spending 5 hours per day with a sign in front of the school urging people to vote against the budget. Board members are not supposed to be that political, right? Is there a problem? Tell me.
Well, we act as a board, and the time for us to have that disagreement is when we're approving the budget, when we have a motion and we're having a discussion. But it really, I think as a board, even though we may have different opinions, once the board makes a decision, it's not my decision or his decision, it's our decision, and we all need to own it, because there's always been a time that Tony might be on the other side and everybody else may want to be standing with the sign. And if we don't act cohesive as a board, how are the voters and the public that they're thinking that we're giving them sound and safe advice? I think, I've always felt, I've been on a lot of wrong sides of the 4-1 vote, but I'll support it, but I will say something and I get to make my statement at the time to do the vote.
So, well, first off, we all need to get this guy's job right, that he has 5 hours a day to stand in front of the school. But, so you give up your First Amendment rights when you become a board member? So what if Tony had just put a sign in his front yard? An op-ed in the newspaper?
I'm just gonna need something from the rest of the board.
And this goes back to some self-policing. The difference here is, and what courts have kind of said is, if you're using the trappings of your position to advance your speech, that can be seen as, I'm saying illegal, that's not the exact right term, but improper. I think Tony here, standing on the front of the school, in front of the school where he's a school board member for 5 hours a day with a sign, is using his trappings to stand in front of the school. He is a school board member. If he puts a sign in his yard, I don't think there's a lot you can do about that. And somewhere along that continuum is a split. And it's not really easy to find. Yes?
Well, I just want to make a comment that, I am voted into this position, and so if I'm not answering to the board, I will surely be answering to the citizens that voted me into
Yeah.
the position. So
Yep.
there is accountability outside of the board too.
Yep, that electorate power, right? The electorate has the power to vote you out. Assuming that they can find somebody to run against you, right? I also know this too, this is a volunteer position for most, I get it. Well, actually, so let's say you as a board come up and you say, you know what, that he's done even more than this. He has handed out pamphlets with the board, signing in as a board member. What can you do about that?
Keep down, make sure,
Yeah, no, say it out loud. Yeah.
You can censure him.
Yeah, and what is it? We hear about censures all the time. What is it?
The board would actually vote that to not support his speech.
Right, it's a public letter of reprimand for the most part. And that's kind of what the authority that you have to do in that particular situation. Okay. You as board members have access to a lot of information. One of the most important things you can do is not talk about any of it. Especially employee personnel matters, student matters, and things that happen in executive session. Right? You're getting this information. It's to inform your actions as a board, but it's outside of what the public has the right to know. Yes?
Sorry, this came up a couple years ago when I wasn't on the board, but how do you handle something where the board kind of needs to, I'm thinking of Facebook, I'm thinking of gossip within a very small community, and it seems tone deaf for a board not to acknowledge that by name, while also in this particular instance, there was a medical component that couldn't be disclosed. And so instead, the board got torn apart for it, even though everybody, and so how do you?
Unfortunately, you're going to get torn apart sometimes for things you can't explain.
Sure, but it seemed highly inefficient.
It's different. Maybe I misunderstood your hypothetical here, which wasn't hypothetical, but was that medical condition exposed on Facebook?
Yes.
So that's in the public already, right? I would encourage you as a board not to talk about it because that's another public forum that's going out on, but it's already in the public realm at that point. Nobody's going to come crashing down on you if you say, I saw the Facebook post. But you will learn a lot of other stuff as a board member that's not on Facebook that absolutely needs to stay quiet. So yeah, look, we could do 3 hours on social media. It is really, we need to go back to 2007 and shut some things down before we get here. But it's an excellent question. Okay. Board's favorite topic, the open meeting law. So in Vermont, there is an expectation that what we do happens in public and that the public gets to know what you're doing. So the open meeting law applies to your boards and your committees, except the negotiations committees. Negotiations is almost entirely executive, right? Because you're negotiating your contracts with your union representatives. A meeting is a gathering of a quorum of the members of a public body for the purpose of discussing the business of the public body or to take action. So if there's a quorum of you together and you're talking about school business, that's a meeting. So when you run into each other at the Christmas party, talk about basketball. Meetings can occur by audio camera or other electronic means. We're going to talk about that. And the open meeting law, so we were talking about quasi-judicial functions. So open meeting laws don't apply when your students are putting in disciplinary action and personnel things are coming up. Okay. Remote attendance. So, this all changed for us during COVID. It's great. More people can come. You can show up remotely. There are some rules around that. Board members can attend via electronic means. The members have to identify them. So there's 7,000 people on that Zoom thing because you're talking about your budget. Identify yourself as a board member, as one of those people that's on the Zoom meeting. Member must be able to hear the conduct of the meeting so that you can go via Zoom, but you gotta participate. You have to know what's going on. You can't just take a vote because people are raising their hand on the camera. If the quorum is remote, the public must have a location where it can physically attend. I think you all know this. If your board is meeting basically via Zoom, somebody's got to be in this gym where people can come and show up physically. 2024, I don't know, did anybody here take the open meeting laws training given by VSBIT, by the Secretary of State? There's a couple of them. So there were changes in 2024 to the open meeting laws. They permit advisory bodies, those that don't have supervision, control, or jurisdiction over legislation, to meet electronically without a physical meeting. Your committees can meet without having somebody in a physical location, basically. Requires all other public bodies to record in audio or video form their meetings and post the recordings in a designated electronic location for a meeting of 30 days. You have to record your meetings, you have to post them. Somebody at the district is taking care of that for you. I want you to thank them every single day because it's not easy. And just the ability to the public to come So when is it a meeting? When a quorum meets to consider the governmental functions, including that you have supervision over. What's not a meeting? Any communications, email, telephone, for the purpose of scheduling, organizing an agenda, or distributing materials for this meeting. So, administrative functions to get a meeting that's going to happen. Social gatherings, conventions, trainings, press conferences, those aren't meetings, as long as the members don't discuss the governmental business. So you go, say you take your board off-site to a training, you're taking the training and you're not talking about business. Okay? So just draw that delineation in your mind. Is it a meeting? The board chair sends an email, I love email, to all members that looks like this. Dear members, I think that the principal is awful and should be fired. Here are the reasons why. He smells bad and the kids hate him. I saw him drinking on the job. Let's discuss at the next meeting. One board member replies to all, got it, I had similar worries. Let's discuss at the meeting. Another member forwards it to one other member. I think this is a frame job, let's fight this. Is that a meeting? Yeah, don't do this. Don't do this. Think of your email, your board email, as an information collection device. And that's it. You're getting your agenda, you're getting the materials for the meeting, maybe the public emailing the board, but don't use it to do this. What about, we work with school, there are Google Docs. What about a board Google Doc that everybody leaves comments on? Is that a meeting? Yeah, don't do that either. You want to make edits to a document, talk about it in public.
I wonder, it seems like a doodle poll might be just scheduled.
Schedule, yep. Excellent point. We do too much on our computers. Right, back 2007, forget that. 1987, we all need to go back. Okay. The public has rights to attend. Decisions of the board must be made in open session, except where quasi-judicial recommendations, those are behind closed doors, those discussions. There's got to be an agenda. You got to tell the public what you're going to be talking about. The public needs to know, the public is going to want to know whether they want to come to your meeting or not. In February, we're talking about the budget. That's 150 people. In April, we're talking about whether we should adopt a different math structure. I think there should be 150 people for that, but you'll get to, right? So they need to know what you're talking about. And that's why when we talk about agendas, the first item on most agendas is adjustments to the agenda, right? Put that on there. I want you to be really careful about adding things to agendas. If you start adding things to agendas and the public isn't there to talk about it, that looks really bad. You could do something at the end of your agenda that says, hey, maybe in future considerations, let's talk about X. Something you're collecting ideas from your board members. Don't just start adding things to agendas. It gets people in trouble really quickly.
What's your remark, even if it's a non-decision point, it's more informational?
I'm pretty blanket about this, but sure, of course, that first time it shows up on your agenda, you're usually having discussion and then action at your next meeting. But there's a lot of information that's coming out. The public's going to say, I should have been there to say something that first time. Yes, of course, that's much easier, but just be careful. Just be careful. Okay. So the public comes to your meetings. There's a public comment period. And a lot of times there's not anybody there. Sometimes there's a lot of people there. How do you handle that situation? How do you handle those people that are there? They're allowed to talk about anything for the most part, right? I encourage you in the public comment section to be listeners and say, we'll get back to you. Even if it's something that seems really obvious, set that expectation about stuff that's not on your agenda to start with. So the public shall be given reasonable opportunity to express its opinions on matters considered by the public body during the meeting. There's that piece. You can restrict to people within your district. You can establish regular rules about public comment. We're going to talk about them. And for school boards, the public may request a written response on matters considered by the board. Appears to exclude public comment. So if they write to you, hey, I want to know more about the budget, please give me a written statement about the budget for the Dover School, and you provide the budget. That's a written response. So public participation. You can't limit based on the subject matter of the comments, right? So that's not a limit that we set. It can be limited to a reasonable amount of time. We usually say like 3 minutes. Civility, right? People aren't allowed to swear at you all. I wouldn't let them do that. You can limit, this happens a lot when it's one big issue, right? People start saying the same thing over and over, right? Same point. You can take control of that a little bit and say, we've heard that from Ms. Fowler already. Do you have anything else to add to the discussion? And you can't apply the neutral rules in a biased fashion. So if you start letting everybody on the yes side say whatever they want, you can't all of a sudden say to the people on the no side, oh, we've already heard that. So just be cautious about it.
So back to the very first one, cannot be based on subject matter of the comment.
This is the when we set up our rules. So when we're setting up rules for public comment, you can't say in there, public comment will only be about buses.
But during the discussion, you can say comments will only be permitted that are relative to the discussion that we're having.
Yeah. So here are some samples. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. Speakers will remain civil. The board may choose not to respond to any statements or questions raised. Public comment is your opportunity to speak to the board. They're there to speak to you. Respond to them after. Think about it. Make sure a lot of times someone's speaking to the board and one board member answers that doesn't represent actually what the majority of the board might have said. So be careful about that. We may ask you to wrap up your remarks if they're redundant. Every speaker is expected to identify themselves, name, and where they're from. Because people that get to speak at your meeting are from your district. You don't get to truck in people from somewhere else to host your cause. The board will be meeting to discuss closing a school. The rules require that each person be given 3 minutes. There are at least 50 people who want to speak during public comment. Do we really have to sit through 2 hours of public comment? Can we just skip over it? How do we deal with it? Oh, come on, I just told you. Somebody tell me what I do.
Everyone, the 3 minutes, and they take 2 things.
Right.
Yes, and move on. And we can also set the only a certain amount of time for public comment altogether.
Yeah, so, and look, I think this is sort of a good overall rule. You want to hear all the arguments. You don't have to hear all the arguments 7 times. The 3 minutes, when you get to a point when you're timing people talking, they hate that. So be really strict about it with everybody. Give them warnings. You're at 2.5 minutes, you got about 30 seconds left. Okay, give them warnings. I've never had anybody more upset with me than somebody I cut off during public comments because they had another 5 minutes to say the same thing over. Okay. Chair establishes the agenda. The agenda can be modified at the beginning of the meeting. That's the adjustment to the agenda. Modification, you have to vote on that modification. So again, and this is why I caution you about modifying your agendas. The purpose of the agenda is to notify the public what's coming up. And also your agendas need to be at least semi-specific. The public needs to know what you're talking about in some specificity. The board wishes to discuss Peter Principal's job performance. The agenda indicates that the executive session will be regarding a confidential personnel matter. A member of the public demands to know who the employee is and what kind of conversation will occur. What do you do? So your agenda, you would point them to your agenda, which would say executive session for personnel. If an action needs to be taken about the principal, that will happen in public. But that discussion is personnel in an executive session. Just be cognizant of that. Your employees have rights too. Best practices. Include a description, content for the agenda. So this is just a sample status of the equity task force. The board will hear from the district equity task force. Just be a little more, not just one line, a little more specific. Identify, so try and control your meeting through your agenda. Identify how long each one's going to be talked about. The agenda needs to set up date, time, location of your meeting. Where can people physically be? Where can they be on Zoom? And again, talking about adjustments to the agenda. Minutes. I'm sure you all have people who take minutes in meetings. Thank them as well. They're required for all public meetings. They've got to cover all topics and motions. They got to cover who was there, who outside the board was there and participated actively. All motions and proposals, and the results of any of those. Pretty straightforward. All right, let's talk about executive session really quick, and then I'm going to be quiet, you guys. So there's things that you all talk about as board members that go into executive session. That means confidential for reasons set out in the statute. And they're in 2 different buckets. One set, it takes 2 different motions to get into executive session, and the other set is just 1 motion, and there's a reason. So these are things that take 2 motions to get into executive session, because you need to find first that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage. So I move to find that the contract for the cement mixer being talked about in public will set up, that premature talking about that, general public knowledge will clearly place us at a disadvantage because they know what we're willing to pay, even if we're still in negotiations. And then the second motion is I move us into executive session for, to talk about the contract based on the first finding. The second set is a little clearer. This is the set where we just say, I move to go into executive session for negotiating of a real estate purchase based on statute. Where employment evaluations, disciplinary, clearness, public safety issues, academic records, especially, or discipline, that's all. I move us into executive session to have a student disciplinary hearing. Yeah. The VSBIT has a really good executive session like cheat sheet on their website. There it is. Yes, sorry.
So when you move into an executive session, there should always be a small snippet of information about why you're going into executive session.
Yeah, it has to be at least specific enough to say executive session, student discipline hearing. Okay. That's it. Do you have questions for me? I know you have questions because I was just an overview. So I'm sure there's some specific things that have come up that I definitely didn't. No, except you. You're not allowed. Yeah.
I wanted if you would go into the part of the quasi-judicial hearing a little more about impartiality and your right to impartiality and the damage and the danger that you aren't impartially informed to that.
Sure. So we're talking about impartiality in quasi-judicial hearing, say for employees that's been fired, been terminated, asked for a board hearing. They come to you and say, I demand my rights under the contract or the statute to have a hearing before the board. And what the question here is that board, those board members sitting on that quasi-judicial hearing, quorum of the board, and someone there maybe isn't, should have conflicted themselves out. Let's just use that as a hypothetical. Somebody there knows the person, knows their family, I don't know, rents them their house, something like that. That's a little more substantial than just, I know them from town. And look, if that function says, oh, you know what, this person shouldn't have been fired, let's give them their job back, the employee's not gonna do anything, right, about that. But if that group then says, we agree with the administration, this was a just cause termination, that employee will come back and say, you know who shouldn't have been in my hearing? Is person X, because they know X, Y, and Z, and they weren't impartial when they made their decision. Now, they have to go through the court process for that. They may come in public, right? They may come to a public comment session and say, hey, I had a hearing, and I think the board screwed up. That doesn't sound good. When I say conflict of interest and you have to hold yourself responsible, it's because those types of things can happen, right? There are bad, even though you think you're impartial, somebody else has the appearance that they're not impartial, can harm. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I want to add.
Yes, please.
That, it isn't necessarily a conflict of interest. If it's not necessarily a conflict of interest, there still can be issues. If
Yes.
you have prior knowledge.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
I mean, no, I want to
no.
hear of that part, but
Yeah.
I want to hear this part too.
So, and I think it's the same discussion. You come to that hearing, but you know all the facts already, or at least you think you do. You've made up your mind, because I heard that this happened and this happened, there was no mitigating circumstance. You already have that in your brain walking into a hearing. That employee will say, they weren't impartial, they knew everything that there was to know before I got to say my piece. That's why, for those types of situations, student discipline hearings too, you should know as little as possible before you walk in and sit down. I'm sorry, I know.
No,
Yep.
that's, I want to make sure both parts there were covered.
Yep. Yes.
I have a question about public comment.
Yep.
So let's say, for example, a school school is being closed, because we know everybody shows up for that. Do you, if you know you're gonna put that on your agenda, you know 75 people are going to speak, can you say we are giving a half-hour time for public comment for 3 minutes per person, or do you have to allow all 75 people to speak?
It's a great question, and there's not a real answer to that other than political. So first, if you're going to adopt public comment rules, you shouldn't all of a sudden have a 3-minute time limit because something controversial came up. You should have it on your agendas, on the back of your agendas or something right now. It says this is the way we run public comment. For something like closing of a school, you'd probably call a special meeting for something like that and plan to have a longer time to talk. Because, and look, it may rile up just a certain part of your electorate instead of having a balance of each, but having a place where somebody didn't get to say their piece, repetitive aside, is difficult going forward for you, even if they're not on what you believe is the right side of the issue. So yeah, you can limit, might present problems. You know, suggest something big like that, you do a separate meeting. This is like the teachers at the end of the, they didn't raise their hand. Thank you so much for listening to me, because I know that's boring. And look, if you have questions that come up, reach out to your board chairs, reach out to Bob. Happy to answer what I can. There's a lot, board members, a lot. We scratch the surface of stuff that can happen with board members tonight. Who put me on the screen? Shut that up. So, be careful out there. And thanks for what you do.
One of his partners coming in, and he wanted to do this first at 5 o'clock because he didn't want to drive, right? And because it gets dark early down here now, right? It's probably dark outside. So I said, I had a joke. So I don't know everybody who's here tonight, but Emily went to Leland and Gray a few years before I went to Leland and Gray, and then Pietro went to Leland and Gray a few years after I started. So I heard this.
When I was there.
Yeah, no, I don't think he was.
I think he was 7.
Okay. But anyways, so I just wanted to say that, he wanted to make sure he got back. So I want to tell you, and I can't take credit for this. I have to give credit to Alan Bills. And, you know Alan Bills, he's a great guy from Wardsboro. But this 80-year-old farmer got married. A 21-year-old girl. Talk to the town. Everybody was this. So finally, somebody went up to him and said, Farmer Brown, why'd you marry that girl from down Hollow? She's only 21. And is she a really good cook? Oh, he said, nah, she can't even boil water. Worst cook I've ever seen in my life. Does she keep the house really clean? Nah, she can't clean any. She's the biggest slob I ever met. Is she a great companion? Oh, we have hardly anything in common. We don't even sleep in the same room. Why did you marry her? She can drive at night. So I was just going to pick on Pietro. She's not as old as us, but it does get harder to drive at night until we get. So anyways, that was your concern.
You always make me nervous.
Greg, you want to have that thought? Before we release you guys to the trough food here, I did want to just recognize folks that kind of helped put tonight together. First, a quick shout out about the room and the setup and the prep. Tracy is the host principal. If you don't know Tracy Marsh, we should just raise your hand. She's our host principal. She worked with Nicole, who's my new executive assistant. And Brent Frost, who helped let everything out here as well. But the real stars of the show are the ones that prepared this great meal for you guys tonight. And we have Dawn from Marlboro. We have Dave from West River /Ann Morales. And Kathleen, who is the Dover cook here. And we'll say quick thanks to them. And do you guys have suggestions about how we go about this feast?
Do it.
Do it. All right, come on up, both sides of the table.
Hey, Bob had a saying for this, and nobody got it, so I brought a present. This is a cane my grandfather had when he was in Germany. When he'd go to an Oktoberfest event, he has these little shields, and he would mount the shield, so it's really kind of cool. So I brought that. But this is Oktoberfest, and he didn't say that.
I did.
So I just hope you brought some root beer for us, because it is a school, and in the old days you used to be able to have beer in school, but you can't. Thank you for coming to Oktoberfest.
Oktoberfest. Help yourselves, guys.
I call meeting order. Want to welcome everybody to Dover. We went to Marlboro a few years ago when Bill was superintendent, and Dan got to tell a great story about it was the old family farm, and he remembers as a kid hanging off the rafters and diving into the hayloft. I wish I could tell you that this was our old family farm and this was a barn and we could be hanging off, but this school has a really interesting history. I found out on another committee I served on that in 1960, late 60s, early 70s, the bond bank started for Vermont, and they funded 15 projects throughout the state, and this was one of those projects. And I don't know if Tracy knows this, but one of her teachers, her grandfather, was on the board when they were building this building. So they got a bond to build this building. Rod Williams designed it. Who else would design a flat roof in Vermont, especially in Dover? But he got Loney Construction out of Brattleboro. If any of you have been around for a while, you might remember Loney was a real big contracting firm. And they got enough money. They were able to build the gymnasium. They built where the library is and everything kind of that way. And there was a kindergarten room as you come in to the left. Well, they didn't have enough money to build that, but Clyde Jones was supposedly he was probably that farmer I was telling you about earlier. But he kept telling Loney, yeah, I'm going to get that check for you. I'm going to get that check for you. But what he had done was, back then, they gave him the whole check, and he put it in the bank. I think it was Vermont National. It's a story I was told. And he put it in some high interest stuff. He was probably getting 2.25% at the time. But so about 6-8 months into the project, he said, remember that kindergarten room we had to cut because we didn't have enough money? And he said, yeah. He said, well, he says, how much is that really going to cost to build now that you're up here? Oh, it'll be X number of dollars. He said, go ahead and do it. He had saved, gotten enough interest to build a kindergarten room, which is kind of a cool story and something that, it's a little bit unique to the old Vermonters, who were very frugal and knew how to stretch a penny very far. So then in this kind of bothers me, in the mid-'80s, the school board was looking to expand. So they did this really big campaign. You were here then. They did this big campaign on this addition we need. It was like, I don't know, $7 million, And people said, wow, that's too much. We said, we voted down buying you another portable classroom because Newburgh had 2 of them, and Newfane had 2 of them. They couldn't get rid of them. And the the board came in and wanted to buy another portable classroom, but they said, no, we want you to build an addition. We're going to give you $100,000 to hire an architect and go to a bond vote. So they went to a bond vote. And they had all this stuff. They had a big teacher's lounge. They had an auditorium out here. There's going to be a stage there. Into the bank in the back was going to be a big auditorium, seating so everybody could do. And this room sucks for acoustics. They used to do everything in here, and they stopped doing. That's why all the carpets are on the wall. But they had all this stuff they were going to build, and the town voted it down. Pretty substantial, probably. I think maybe 20% voted, it's like 30, 70 maybe. So the school board said, it was snowing that day, so we're gonna have a revote. They gave out the exact same thing. They didn't change a darn thing. They gave that vote out, and guess what? It got turned down like 2-1, maybe 3-1. It was really bad. So the school board went and they just started cutting, and one of the things they slashed was the auditorium and the acoustics and making everything better, the teacher's lounge, a few other things. Well, they voted on that, and that passed because they made a change. But come to find out, for less than a couple $100,000, we could have had that auditorium, and the board never said that. And I said, gosh, if I'd known that, I'd have pushed really hard to get people to vote for that. Because anytime you talk in here, it's really awful. You have to be very loud. Again, they used to do the graduations, the sword dance. Remember the sword dance with Mr. Andy Davis? So anyways, it's kind of a cool building, but they did build the addition over there. I am proud to say that in Windham Central, we are the only school in the entire district that has a sewer plant that takes our sewage. The rest of y'all have that, septic systems and stuff. So it's a pretty cool school. It's a great school. Tracy's done a great job with it. She's definitely brought some different colors in. First time I went in her office, I was shocked because it was like such a nice light in there. All she'd done was hung some stuff over the lights, and it just really dampened that room. So it's a really beautiful building. Greg's done helped us get new roofs on this. It's a really nice spot. Last story I'm going to tell you about it. Again, I can't match Dan's, but as the emergency management director for the town, I have to do all the plans for emergency management. So I submitted a plan to the state, and the state said, okay, we like your whole plan, but you have nothing about the school for a flood. And I said to them, and this is why I get so mad with the state, because they look at everything flat. I said, I got to tell you something. If our school is flooded, you got a whole bunch more things to worry about, because Brattleboro is going to be 1,000 feet underwater. Don't worry about us in flooding. We're at the top of the food chain on floods. So anyways, I'm Rich Werner. I am chairman of the River Valley School Board. I was chairman of the Dover School Board, and I've been on the school board in Dover since the turn of the century, the last century, not the big one. And I've been chair of Windham Central. I was chair for a little bit. Then Emily took chair, and then I got chair back. And we have a really great district. We have a lot of great people. I think this is our, fifth superintendent we've been through? Sixth one? They keep getting better as we go. I don't know how.
Better, what did you say?
No, better. Just better at everything.
Better at basketball.
There you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to run around the room real quick, and I'm going to pick on Eli, because I like to call him Levi, because Meredith is eating. And I got your name right.
Eli,
River Valley Board.
River Valley Board.
And
Full ride, executive assistant.
Creighton Ross, Director of Finance, Central. Francesca Palumbo.
Tracy Bosch, principal here at Dover.
I'm Jen Music, Executive Director of Teaching.
Chris Peoples, Director of Student Services.
Richard Clayton, Marlboro School Board.
David Gordon, BC, principal of Marlboro.
Randy Lichtenwalder, principal of Townsend Elementary.
Dan MacArthur, Marlboro School Board.
I'm Scott Exposing, I'm principal at Newbrook Elementary School in New Haven.
And Sarah Webb, I'm on the West River District. I'm Kate Garrett, I'm also on the West River Board.
Crystal Barview, West River School Board.
Kate Fellows, Windham School Board.
Melissa Walker, Chicago School Board. Pete Ryan, Board.
What one?
Renee Winchester, Director of Curriculum.
Dana Quadro, Principal, Leland and Gray.
Matt Martin, Director of Technology.
Joe Goodman, West River Education District.
Ellen Law, Westbrook.
Meredith.
Meredith Black, River Valley Board, and Minute Taker for most of your meetings. Except for you.
So I'd like to thank everybody again. We have a pretty packed agenda tonight. Make sure you don't get any dessert, because Tracy, I'll take some to go later. You can hide before me. So on the agenda, how do you want to do this, Bob? We got welcome. Legal updates, we did dinner, we did changes to the agenda. Ah, we just learned about this.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Hey folks, hang on, go ahead. Oh, do we have anybody on TV land? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
We're talking about changes to the agenda, I just have a question. I came prepared to talk a little bit about the closing of the fiscal year 25 opening, but there really isn't a place for that on this agenda, so I didn't know if you want me to do it with the budget timeline for federal funding, or if you would rather I wait.
Okay, does anybody have an issue if we just add that in under the budget timeline? Because that's gonna be high staying, it's kind of just some good information. We closed the last year. She's got some pretty good news. Okay, anything else?
Besides telling everybody they have to speak up, it's really hard to hear.
Yeah, so also, if you could raise your hand, but enjoy the food because there's even more over there. Okay, so under new business, we have VEHI and VSBIT Proxies. This is something we wind up doing every year. I think one of these is, no.
They're both Thursday, 8:15 Thursday. Thursday the 30th.
Right, and are you going?
I am going, and I'm going to have the West River Proxies. So.
Okay, so I would love a motion from somebody to, if you don't mind, Joe's gonna be there anyways, can we approve for the WCSU chair to sign the proxies to give our vote to Joe Winrich? Kate moved that, do I have a second? Second, thank you, from Marlboro. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It appears to be an unanimous decision in the affirmative. It is. Look at that, first order of business. WCSU reorganization update. So, Jen, are you going to lead that?
Yes.
Okay. We could.
Nicole has this side.
Okay. You want to go into Zoom and then share your screen and do the watch? Is that the best way, or do you want to?
Rachel, do you want to do C on that?
Okay, C. Well, again, this is you, kind of, right?
Yeah, we can talk about that piece.
Okay, so if nobody has a problem, let's jump to C while they get set up for B. Board of Cooperative Education Services, BOCES. We've had a lot of discussion about this in the last couple meetings. Last spring, we voted to front some money because they had a shortfall, and I believe the BOCES is, Bob's going to talk about it, and we are going to need to have a vote. It is going to cost us some money and to become a member, but again, we've been told that it saves us money. So Bob, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready. So we have been a member of the Vermont Learning Collaborative, which is what we were just referencing for the last several years. In fact, Bill Antone was one of the co-founders of it numerous years ago, along with the Springfield superintendent. And Stephanie was the chair while she was here as the director of student services. With the law passing a year and a half ago now that allowed BOCES to exist, this Board of Cooperative Education Services, the collaborative is shifting from a collaborative to a BOCES model, which is a different structure, has its own approved structure. Really, it's recognized as a sort of an entity, like a district would be, and not like collaborative. And so it's the first one in the state. In fact, the state didn't know how to really do it, and so our collaborative has been leading the way to develop the articles of establishment. And so it has been approved as the first one, and so now there's SUs and SDs that are joining it from the Southeast region. And so all of the ones in our region have joined it with the exception of two. We are one of the two, and it's only because we haven't had the opportunity to have this conversation yet. There are fees annually, and our fees are related to our percentage of the students that we have within the whole collective. So our fees annually will be in the neighborhood of $14,000. And what that does is it gets us membership rates on services, which could be staffing, shared staffing between different districts or SUs. It could be professional learning opportunities that we do for our staff, or or other things like that. And could be programs that get built that we would get, if we were tuitioning students into a program, like a special education program, we would get a cheaper rate than non-members. So it is our belief that the 14,000 number is something that's easily going to pay for itself each year. And if more as students join, that number goes down because we become a smaller percentage of the overall student count. So that's our estimate right now, which their estimate they're giving us. But after consulting, Jen and I spent a lot of time talking about this. And you guys had a presentation about the collaborative from not Kim, what's her name, Jill, last spring about the collaborative. We recommend that you guys authorize joining the BOCES, and we would build into the budget the $14,000 to pay our membership fee. But we really think this is a huge benefit for our kids and our staff, and it can help us save money in the long run, which is the point of the BOCES, efficiency, regional efficiencies. So that's where I'm at, and happy to take any questions about that. We have I only have one copy of the contract. It's like 30-something pages long for Rich to review, but it's basically a pretty standard operating contract for BOCES. And if the board member was willing to make a motion, there's a very long motion that's in the text here on the agenda that they need captured in minutes. I need to give them the signature page if we approve it, and we need to give them draft minutes as well to show that we have joined officially. So happy to take any questions.
Jen, do you have anything to add to that? You all set? Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Bob? Yes.
So I just have a question because I thought I kind of knew what BOCES was because the school I went to, we had BOCES. So it provided like technical type training for students like cosmetology, forestry, several different things.
I'm guessing you're from New York.
Yes.
Yeah. So the New York model is a little bit expanded of this. It does include sort of CTE centers as part of that function. But those BOCES also do the things I described. Our BOCES model is just doing the things I described and not providing direct education service through to the CTE center. Those CTE centers still exist. So, career and tech ed, CTE center, like our students go to the Regional Center at Brattleboro School.
Are you all set?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? You want to play Stump the Superintendent?
Bring it on.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion that has been included on the page here so that we can have a discussion with the motion on the table.
Okay, so Dan has moved that Windham Central Supervisory Board vote to approve participation as a founding member supervisory union in the proposed Southeast Vermont Region Board of Cooperative Educational Services, BOCES under 16 VSA Chapter 10, to approve and adopt the Articles of Agreement for the BOCES as presented, authorize the board chair or designee to sign the Articles of Agreement and submit them to the Vermont Secretary of Education as required by 16 VSA 603, and authorize a supervisory union or school district representative to participate in organizational meetings and take all necessary steps to implement the BOCES in accordance with Vermont law. Does anybody want to second that wonderful motion Dan made? Thank you. Dwight seconded it. Is there any more discussion? Dan is making the motion. You always got first dibs to ask any questions or make any comments.
For one thing, I like the presentation about what it potentially does for our staff and our kids. But I think that having originated right in this region and us not being participatory at this point is a little bit embarrassing as well. So I'd like us to catch up on that.
Okay. All right, you get second dibs. Anybody else would like to follow up? Comments, questions, stump the superintendent? Okay. If not, are you ready to vote? If you're ready to vote, all those in favor of the motion I read and Dan made, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Appears as though the ayes have it. The ayes have it. So we have to authorize a school district rep to participate. Bob, do you have a suggestion?
I do have a suggestion. I would suggest that we authorize Jen Cusick
So
to be our representative.
can we get a motion to that effect from somebody? Please?
I will certainly make that motion as well.
Okay,
Authorize Jeffrey Cusick to be the representative to participate in organization meetings, take all necessary steps, etc.
to implement the BOCES in accordance with Vermont law.
You got it.
Second,
Oh, good. You are a voting member on West River, right?
yes.
Okay. I never remember who all the voting members are. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? I think Jen wants it really bad. She can't run it right over. Okay.
What do I sound for?
So if there's no other discussion, all those in favor of Jen Cusick as acting as our SU representative to participate in the organization meetings and take all necessary steps to implement the BOCES in accordance with Vermont law, signify so by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. Appears as though the ayes have it and unanimously. It's a tough word. It is, so congratulations, you just won something tonight. Are you guys ready, or do we want me to hit the policy review quick?
If it's easier for you, go ahead.
Let me do the policy review, and I'll turn it over to you, and I'll eat my cupcake. It's plural. Policy review, we have first reading of 2 policies, which should be in your packet. Policy D8, selection of library materials. So this would be, we're gonna make a motion to accept them and post them for warning. And then Bob will post them throughout the district and on the website. And then after they've been posted for a minimum of 15 days at our next meeting, probably around the time we're approving budgets, we will then get to vote to adopt them. Would anybody like to make a motion to move D8, selection of library materials?
I would like to move that, with the one edit that we take out Marlboro School, better page.
I was wondering about that.
Dan stuck that in there to recognize Marlboro. Good job. So we got one edit. It says Marlboro School District. It should say Windham Central.
Okay.
And Bob will fix that before he posts it. So would anybody like to second Ms. Rideout's motion?
I will.
Thank you, Joe. So we have a second by Joe. Any discussion from anybody? Hearing none. All those in favor of policy D8 being warned for selection of library materials, please signify so by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, signify so by saying nay. It appears to be a unanimous decision in the affirmative. It is. Onwards to F5. Melissa, you look like you really want to do this. You're so intent. So you'll move to adopt or to post for warning F5 behavioral threat assessment. Kate? Kate will second it. That way you get your name in the minutes too, so everybody will know you're here. Is there any discussion on F5 behavioral threat assessment? Does that say Marlboro 2, Dan? Did you sneak that?
Windham Central.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Are you ready to vote? All those in favor of approving for warning policy F5 behavior threat assessment team signify so by saying aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Signify so by saying nay. It appears as though the ayes have it unanimously. The ayes have it. Congratulations on your 2 new policies, 1 to fix and 1 2 to post. Jen, we're going to turn it over to Jen to do our Board of Cooperative Education Service. I'd like to ask that you hold questions until she's done. When she's done, then we will recognize people that have questions. So are you going to take it over?
Great,
Okay.
yes, I'm actually also going to invite Chris people for the day, who usually come on up with me, or sort of be efficient with our guys, come on up. Also, if, I will not be offended if anyone needs a cupcake right now, that's absolutely. Yes. Cupcakes.
You don't want to really
Thank you,
bad.
Dan. Appreciate it.
And actually, before you get us out, I'm just able to, we opted this year, talking with the executive committee, to not do the full slate of principal presentations that we usually do, and to take a break from that for this year because we really wanted to emphasize the work that this team, this new reorganization, what the work this team is doing, because it's really the biggest thing that's happening in the SU for us. So I just want to say, so you're not going to hear from principals and schools, you're only going to hear from this group tonight. Of course, now you'll have our own fun later, but yeah, this is my MTSS team.
So hi everyone, I'm Jen McKusick. I am the new title of Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. In our restructuring last year, we have now Executive Director, and we have our Director of Curriculum Instruction, Renee Williamsing, our Director of Student Support Services, Chris Peebles, and not with us tonight is David Cohn, our Director of Socio-Emotional Learning, Wellness, and Equity. David's actually traveling. He's in Scotland right now. And he did talk to me about, was there a way to zoom him in tonight? And I said, it's gonna be okay. So we will handle this part. So, what's that? We did, he's in. So we just have a few slides just to give a quick overview of some of the work we're doing. I think it's probably hard for everyone to see this, it would be for me to see this right now. But we've really been thinking a lot about our vision as an MTSS team. One of the things that's happened, yes, with the audit last year, and having someone come in and a consultant work with us, we've known for a while that we've become siloed in our work. We've become siloed in SEL behavior, we've become siloed in special ed, siloed even in title academic support, and then curriculum and classroom general ed. So we really want to take this opportunity to work together. So the three directors and myself are really looking at how can we build a better system that fits the needs of our students, helps our students get what they need, helps be more efficient, and makes it so our kids get the best equitable services they can. And we want to do that also for staff. We don't want redundancies. Really try, I want to steal their thunder because they each have pieces to share, but we're looking at everything in a way that we can look at also efficiencies, financial efficiencies, look at how our personnel are used, and how we can strengthen our classrooms. So, I'll get my career, sorry, so it's a little nerve-wracking on first. So I shared this whole thing with you, and you'll have a slide deck later. But this is the logo that we put together as our mission statement for what we intend to do. And I will read that to you tonight. I have to get a little closer. We are creating an equitable, collaborative continuum of services that supports every student's academic, behavioral, and socio-emotional success while fostering teacher growth and equipping educators to ensure all students thrive. And it was really, I think, we did our best to capture that we've been trying to pull these sides of what we have long called the MTSS triangle, the social, emotional, the behavioral, and the academic together, so we can build systems that work for all of our kids in the best equitable way possible. So, let's go back over here again. We have a 3-year plan, or it's actually a 5-year plan, strategic plan about what we hope to do. And I can share all this out with you. It's a lot smaller than I thought it would be when I put it up here, so apologies for that. You tried to make it.
They have the presentation.
They do. You have it in place. But really to emphasize that this first year is, we're calling it the learning and growing year. We're really taking a lot of time to look at everything. We are looking at our programs, we're looking at our curriculum, we're looking about how our personnel are used, we're looking at schedules, we're looking at our budgets, we're looking at everything down to when we were writing an IEP. By writing that IEP, are we making it so more people can support that student without siloing someone that they can only help a kid in this way? And so we're really trying to spend a lot of considerate, thoughtful time looking at everything as a whole. And you'll see I don't want to read a lot to you, but as we move through the next few years, we have goals for what we want to accomplish. And those are things like, I don't let each person talk to their specific parts, but there are pieces where we're talking about connecting EST plans together, connecting, consolidating work, establishing a workflow for schools, and so they're not duplicating services, duplicating people's time, making it so that as we're working to break down these silos that have been created, that we're making sure we're doing all of this in an equitable way so that all students get the same opportunities. And the other side is to help us with staff burnout, that we're not asking staff to run so quickly, but run more efficiently together. So year 2 is establishing new practices, putting into action some of the things we learned from this year, and years 3 through 5 are really refining those. We have some very lofty goals. In years 3 and 5, I think some of those things will change based on what we learn in the next couple of years. But we're already seeing, we've already had some things come to us as a team, and we've sat down with these very challenging circumstances and been able to work through them together. And I think it's already starting to show that we're going to have some great traction. Okay, so I'll turn it over next to Renee Maluzzi, Registrar.
So as Jen sort of started to explain some of our curriculum alignment within the MTSS, so the first thing up here that I have mentioned is how we're redefining our academic support teachers and our special educators and having them become more of a blended interventionist group. And so that means that they're getting professional development together this year and starting to share small groups of students, whether they have an IEP or not. We're trying to really think about what teacher is most qualified for those student needs, and based on scheduling and things like that, we're working on some of those things to make that happen, where we're really, even thinking about, like, it doesn't really matter what grade a student's in either, if they belong in that support group with a need, thinking about how we can blend those services. So that's one big thing we've been working on. We started that in April last year with our first PLC professional development together with academic support and special educators, and we're continuing that this year with the 5 PD days. Some other new things that are up there, we have teachers were coming to us with a lot of programs and resources that they wanted to try out, and since we want to really stick to research-based materials, but we want teachers, this is a great problem to have, that they have new things that they want to try with our students. So we also, though, didn't want to get back to a place where we had 40 plus different literacy curriculum that we were trying to teach and blend together. So I created an approval process where they can submit to do a pilot, and we look at the research behind the program, we look at the data with the types of kids that they're using it for, and then we decide if it's an approved resource or program for our district. So that's an exciting thing. We have 2 in the works right now. Principals and leadership team last spring worked on scheduling recommendations for the different programs, and how long should we be teaching math, how long should we spend on literacy, when is our intervention time, so that we can have a little bit more consistency across the SU around that. Something tied to the approval process for those programs and resources is I'm creating a document with links to all of those programs and resources so that we can ensure that we're using research-based materials, but then also so that teachers and staff have access all in one spot. If any of you use a Google Drive for things, you know how messy that can get when we don't always keep up on our organization, so having a one-stop shop is really nice. And then a really big undertaking this year is myself and the Datum Systems Manager, Samson, who's been a great addition to our IT team. He has been building a data collection tool called NextPath for us. And previous to this year, before we had that tool, we had local assessments and standardized assessments and plans in different places, progress monitoring in a different platform that you would have to log into, and trying to gather all this data material for IEP meetings, 504s, ESTs, or even just regular school meetings. It took a lot of time. So NextPath is, you click on a student and it's all there. We can group students into what interventions they're using, and teachers have access to that too. So him and I just got done with our 8th day of straight data meetings at the schools, facilitating with the principals and the teachers. And we're gonna debrief at the November meeting to see what we can do better, but overall, I think it went fairly well. And we have a common protocol that all the schools are using, and NextPath is starting to get rolled out, and hopefully, eventually, we'll have enough proficiency with the platform that everyone will feel comfortable with it, so that's where we're at with that. Our professional learning this year, so I mentioned the blended interventionist team. We're also on year 2 of our ELED program, which stands for Expeditionary Learning. So very project-based performance tasks. There's new components this year that the teachers are trying to work around. It's a slow rollout, so the expectation is to try it out this year. Labs are for K through 2, which are science-based stations. They're based around engineering and STEM activities. And then Alt Block is differentiated in small groups, so that's 3 through 5th grade. And we have our consultant from last year coming in and helping myself and the coaches give that professional development. Our health educators are continuing with the Act 1 requirements and the new health curriculum resources, and finding what works for our kids for those. We have a combination of different programs. Music is starting to develop a scope and sequence for consistency across the music classes, because I think with the exception of Marlboro, we all have the same music teacher. So getting that to look a little bit more similar within our schools, and also aligning to the National Core Art Standards, which Vermont has adopted. We just finished our very first school learning walk at Townsend. They were very brave and volunteered themselves. It's around EL. We're looking at a common tool, things like total participation techniques and student engagement when we walk into classrooms and do observations. And we will, myself and principals will do one together at their schools. Then we'll have another volunteer site in February and do that all together again. And then in the spring, myself and the principal will do another one. So we're trying to also use that process with our EL coaches and Bridges coaches. So we have EL coaches in the buildings this year. Last year they provided professional development mostly, and they were grade bands, K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8. And this year they're based in buildings, 2 Fridays a month or 2 to 3, depending on, we also meet as a PNC 1 Friday a month too, to talk about what's going well, successes, challenges. And so they're aligning with the Learning Walk tool as well, so that they can use that with teachers to work on different areas of their instruction. And another exciting thing is we have found, we're not quite sure about our phonics program that we've been using in the district. And so I have a pilot group of teachers that were really brave that wanted to try out. It's called UFly. It's from the University of Florida for Literacy Institute. And it's K through 3 phonics program. The teachers are working on it. They've been really gracious about letting me come in and just do some check-ins about student engagement, how's it going. And in the spring, we're going to use some comparative growth data to see what's working for the kids better. And then we'll bring it to leadership team, and leadership will make a decision about where we might want to go with our board programming. That'll be later.
I hope so. This should be David going. We'll see if our technology will get it for us. So because David couldn't be here tonight, he recorded video for all of us. There he is. Thank you. I can speak a little bit about it. I've seen this. If we don't get it running. So as we talk about how we're working together as a team, one of the things that changed is we've had an equity coordinator, but we really want to elevate that to be more of a position that could look at equity, we're looking at everything through a lens of equity. So if we're looking for social emotional learning, we're looking through our academics, and we're looking through how we provide special education services, how are we doing that through an equitable lens. So David's really taken on this role as an SEL, equity, and wellness. We've reconfigured counselors, co-supervision of counselors under David as well, so that we're looking at how we provide social emotional learning support services in a systematic way around our SU. And just like with a lot of this behavior ended up in the special ed world, because with lack of having a system or someone running that piece, it just kind of went maybe in special ed a little bit, maybe in general ed a little bit, but we didn't have consistent practices, and we're still working on it. It's not like we have it's October, so we're working on that. But just as Renee talked about professional development being aligned with all the things she's doing in the world of curriculum instruction, we're making sure those worlds are working with special ed and with SEL. So in November, when we have our professional development days, we have a day that is being run by our equity team. But all of that is going to be through this lens of how are all of these pieces connected together to make it best for our district. We can see if it works. If not, we can move on. Okay, we're just going to move on. He says great stuff. Please, I'll try. Okay, so we're moving on to Chris. Here you go.
Okay, thanks.
This arrows.
All right, so in regards to professional development, we're focusing on 5 areas this year. First one's literacy. I collaborated with Renee to build capacity with evidence-based literacy instruction. So to train paras in 5 of the most prominent areas in literacy. And so they are being coached by one of the AST teachers, and they're meeting once a month on the half days to get some instruction on how to help kids with literacy. We also have some regular staff that are also taking that course. The second one is social emotional learning, and I collaborated with David, and we're presenting a de-escalation training. This is something that came out in surveys that people want. They want to learn the best ways to de-escalate students and respond effectively to needs of kids. The third one is executive function skills. This is something that we started in August with the special ed department. We're learning about how to best provide targeted instruction that enhances their independence of students. Functional skills is a new goal area that is something that kids can qualify under. If they have a disability, they can meet the needs in functional skills, and we need to know how to address those needs in services. The fourth one is progress monitoring. That's checking in and seeing if our instruction is effective. So I have a team going to that. They're going to bring back what they've learned, and we're going to share it among the special ed teachers. And then trauma-informed strategies. There's also a team going to learn about interventions to help kids reduce anxiety, increase their self-regulation skills, and work on self-monitoring. Those people are going to come back and bring what they've learned. In regards to IEPs and Section 504 plans, we're examining the MTSS process as a team. We're trying to see how cohesive and efficient we can be. This has to do with implementation of services and compliance with the Vermont laws, the evaluation process of identifying kids with special needs, instructional alignment, and capacity building. Programs and supports for students with the highest needs. We have programs in the district that work with kids that have the most intensive needs, and we are working to build upon those to ensure that they're effective. We're providing supports and interventions for all students, and we're connecting the most highly trained staff with students who have the highest needs. We're trying to align the resources and expertise to maximize student outcomes and foster collaboration across the classrooms, programs, and the tiers of the MTSS.
So thank you. I think one of the things as we go through this process is, Chris has talked about, in case it wasn't highlighted, as we're working with things like executive functioning or trauma-informed strategies, we're making sure that that goes to the classroom teacher through special education and back, so that we're all working together so that it's not one way to try to support students. And that the more we're working, like even as Renee mentioned, sharing programs and interventions, if we're all cross-trained in those programs, making sure that the student, as they receive those layers of support, are receiving help in the general education setting through tiered instruction, through specialized instruction, and that everyone is aware of that and how to do that, so that our classroom teachers' expertise is building up just like we're building up expertise within special.
I'm just gonna add, I think the takeaway for me as I listen to this and had conversations with these guys is what you probably heard that you might not have realized how big the deal it is that Chris referenced something she did with Renee, and Chris mentioned something she did with David, and Renee mentioned something she did with David. David, we couldn't see David. David would have referenced working with Renee and Chris. The purposes of this team structure that we created is forcing collaboration in places that didn't exist before. And that's where the magic happens around coming up with best practices, making it sort of institutional across the SU to help better kid situations and prepare our staff better. That's the magic of what you just heard right there. So
I am just, all I heard was Bob called me magic. And that's
I was going to look earlier.
I think that's it for our presentation for now. I know Renee has some slides to show around some data, but what questions do you have for us at this time?
Sorry. You know I'm going to ask questions. I'm curious about thank you, first of all. This was great, and what Bob just said sort of pulled it all together, and it is exactly what we've been talking about for so long, and it's wonderful to see you implementing these things that we've been working on. Act 173, happened quite a while ago now, and there's been a new report out, which I know you're
It's in my car.
yeah, I know you're familiar with it because Act 73, not 173, which was 2018, I think. Act 73 required a report on the delivery of special ed, the status of the delivery of special ed, and it just came out, and it's really disappointing that we aren't meeting the needs of our kids, and it's not just us, it's everywhere, all over the country, I think. And it makes it all the more important to me at this point in time that we don't abandon the work that we started with 173. But this is my personal perspective, and I'm very concerned about us going off on a tangent with consultants from out of state telling us what we should be doing when we actually passed a law that we know how to implement, and we know it will serve our kids and our communities in our state. So I guess I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I mean, I'm giving you my thoughts, and I'm giving you my thoughts because I was there when we were writing 173. I'm now back on the House Education Committee. I'm really worried about this report sending us in another direction, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this because Windham Central has been on the cutting edge, I think, from the very beginning, because we started out with the district management committee, thank you, and really did implement 173 in a way that others didn't have the opportunity to do. So let me know.
No, that's great. I'm glad the DMG report of 2016 was really our first step into this, that we started talking about how can we arrange things differently to best optimize services for kids. And so I think we have done an amazing job at Windham Central. I don't want to undersell the work that has happened. We have had really focused work on research-based programs on how to have tiered supports for students from general ed all the way through special education, which 10 years ago we did not have. We didn't have that middle ground. So we've built up the expertise of general ed, what they call tier 2, which is really just another tier, and special education. And I think as I read that report, it was depressing for me because I see the good work that is happening. I think over time, things got a little more isolated again. And I think that is where we can correct, and we can bring that back to this kind of work. So both the reinforcement and the forcing collaboration, but stepping back again. We got into a silo where we were holding on, and I'll speak to special ed, but it was like, because we brought up back in 73, is we got to this is how we do special ed, and I think we are cutting edge again, and then we're stepping back to say, hey, but how does special ed part of a bigger process, and how do we blend services? How do we really make sure those kids are getting special education and everything else? And how do we make sure that we're not shortchanging everybody else because we're hyper-focused on special ed? And we have work to do. I have a lot of faith in the team about this. But even little things, Emily, about Renee mentioned UFLA, which is University of Florida Literacy Institute, which we've been looking at. So this is something that we could translate from general education through to special education and have everyone trained so kids are hearing the same language. And we don't necessarily have to over-rely on special ed to provide those services because we can all do it. And that might reduce staff, and that might reduce personnel as we go through this process. But it's going to use these small things like this, which are big undertakings in reality, but these small things are making a difference that we are looking at as a whole and not being micro-focused on things like that, report, which kind of is tailspin, right? Like you can, if you haven't read it, it is worth a read, but it's also things like, oh, we have to work on our transition from high school to age of 21. So I don't want us to shift and start looking at, we have to care, but we have bigger things to work on. And when Renee shows you some of the data that we've been putting together, she mentioned NextPath, and Samson is amazing. Samson, I'm sure, is an amazing data manager. This has been years in the making. I mean, I've been working with Samson since he started. We did an EduClimber pilot. We've been working on NextPath. That is just another way, it's a tool to start to have these conversations be more rich. So we're looking at kids as whole people and not just as one part. And I think one thing I want to Bob, is that the strategies, the strategic plan, I'll make print out the copies and send it out because I think it is worth talking about. It would help, I think, alleviate some of the fears about that. I am in my 10th year working in central office in Windham Central. We are really fantastic SU. And when we go out to and work with other districts and other SUs, they talk about you have that POCAS, and what are you doing around it? Oh, you have that program in-house with special needs, and oh, you're doing these kind of trainings already? It's a fantastic place to work, and we shouldn't forget that, shine that light.
Could I add something? Just as a building principal, this team is pretty amazing because their whole focus, in my mind, is to get the kids what they need first and right now. We don't have a failure model anymore. We're doing what we need to do right away, which to me is a very big deal because it would be very easy for people that are not working directly with kids to get disassociated from the needs of kids. And these guys are like right there with us, and they come to meetings and they're super helpful. So I personally think that the service to the principals and to the staff has been incredible, and this new reorganization has been so helpful in just getting people to understand that all of these aspects of a school day are all related, and you can't succeed in one area unless you're succeeding in all. And I really appreciate your leadership.
Joe David?
Data.
Oh, Data. Yes, I'm sorry. I said what? Sorry, I thought I said Joe David. I was like,
We saw it.
So I am going, no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Renee. And please, if you have individual questions or follow-up, I'm more than happy to answer any questions and have discussions with anyone. Come again. Thanks, Renee. Go for it.
I drew the short straw. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, to kind of connect with the whole NextPath information, so we put together some MTSS data, and in the next slides you'll see some data that from NextPath, a quick view, screenshot of that shows a need for support. I'll explain the MTSS process around those data meetings to you, and then we have some success stories. So we are teaching Bridges Mathematics, and this is our 4th year for some schools, 3rd year for some, and I think we have one school that's in their 2nd year. And it was pretty apparent through the data meetings that it's working, and so that was just some really nice data to see in a platform that we haven't had before. I'll show you some specific students without their names, progress monitoring reports that show some success stories. These are students that have gotten intervention from either academic support teachers or special educators throughout the years and are making progress. I have Samson put in some screenshots for NextPath to give you more of an idea of what it looks like, and then the last slide is a link of all the resources for core and universal and intervention programs that we have. Later on, you can look at it if you're interested, but we have quite an awesome variety of ways to meet the kids' needs. So, okay, so this is our data showing the need for support. So when we log into NextPath and we're looking at a comparison chart for an entire class, or even maybe an entire school, which we did not have before. We did not have ways to look at our whole school data or even across the district. So that's one really positive benefit of NextPath. So we have AimsWeb, which West River and some of River Valley use. Track My Progress for Marlboro, and then the STAR program is the local testing for the high school, 9 through 12, or 9 through 11. Jen, 9 through 11, yeah. And then we have our reading, same platforms there. So, yeah, the green is showing proficiency of students. Yellow are students that are in showing some need for intervention or targeted support, and then the red students are percentages of students who are below the 10th percentile, so kids that we really want to look into. And most of those students, if they haven't been identified yet, they may be in the younger grades, if not.
Renee?
Yes. Yeah.
Does that show improvement over time?
No, it's just a screenshot of a current situation in NextPath. Yeah. The thing with NextPath over time is we only have last year's and this year's data because it's so new. We started building it last year. Okay, so our MTSS process. So most of you, if you're parents, you know that the students take fall benchmark screeners 3 times a year. In the fall for literacy and math, and then it's in order for schools to identify skill gaps with groups of students. So we conduct data meetings after those tests are done. AST, classroom teacher, special educator, principal, and then myself and Samson were involved with those this year. And those are to analyze the data and develop targeted instructional action plans for small groups of students. So-and-so is going to take these 4 kids because they need to work on phonics. And then we determine what phonics skills and what they'll be using to teach those skills as well. So the action plans are then taught to groups of students using those programs and methods. AST and special educators generally teach the most intensive students because they've had the training with the programs, but we are seeing a lot of classroom teachers that are taking on interventions because our programs are so aligned now. For instance, we have Bridges Core, but then we also have Bridges Intervention, which are very similar that a classroom teacher could just pick up and teach a small group of students. So research shows that intervention is effective when it's taught 3 to 5 times a week for about 4 to 6 weeks. So we ensure our schedules provide that essential time within them. Most schools have a win time. If they don't have a win blocked out on their schedule, they figure out when that intervention is going to happen anyways, even if it's not clearly labeled in the schedule. Those individual students are progress monitored depending on weekly or bi-weekly, depending on their need. Most intensive kids get weekly progress monitoring. And then We look at that data, we adjust groups as needed. Lots of students move out after 4 weeks because it was a quick cleanup kind of skill. And then they take it again in the winter and the cycle repeats itself. So that goes on pretty much our whole year. District-wide success story. So I mentioned Bridges. We've had it for a while. But what you might not have known is that we've had the Bridges Intervention Program since 2019. So we actually had that program before we had the core program in our classrooms. And then we adopted the core program for regular class in 2022 to have some coherence and alignment. And now 2022 to present, students are receiving that universal instruction in the classroom, and some of the students in their small groups are receiving the Bridges Intervention. And a trend that we're seeing at all the data meetings in all the schools is that we are really rocking it in math, which is really good to see. So I will show you this is one cohort of kids that I'm going to take you through their second grade, their third grade, and their fourth grade year. First year they had Bridges. Teachers are getting to know it, the program and how to teach it. Some growth, but there they are again the next year. And then their third year with Bridges. And these also include small groups of students that are getting Bridges intervention from academic support teachers and special educators. So you can see what's really exciting is the fall benchmarks after they come back from summer. Second year, there's not as much red and yellow. The third year, there's very little. So it's working and it's exciting news. You might not be able to see some of these, but they will get this slide too, right? Okay. These are the progress monitoring graphs through AIMSweb that we have, and all of these students receive Bridges intervention from a WIN group at least 3 times a week that are up here. They represent skill deficits, attention and focus as well, these 3 students. So typically if you see a graph that has a lot of ups and downs, that can indicate attentional issues in a student, but nevertheless, they are all making progress towards their goals.
So 3 different students.
Yes.
Set of graphs.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3. And you can see their trend line, which is that pink line. They want to be above that, is the goal. And these reports, depending on the age of the student, are generally shared with students, like 3rd grade and up. Teachers will share it to celebrate their growth, and so it's not a secret. Next path, a preview of the system. So what we just did in data meetings is when we created these action plans for students, we were able to add it as a support. These are names that are blurred out, and you can click on view support. You can see who's doing that intervention, what days a week, what they're being progress monitored on, and a nice feature of this too with these groups is you can kind of drag and drop students. So say when they go to adjust their groupings and have looked at progress monitoring, if a student needs to switch to a different group with a different service provider, you can drag and drop that, which is nice. We've never had a tracking system like this all together, where anybody in the, well, depending on your access to Next Path, but anybody could click on a student and see what they're getting. And then when you click on the student, it will show you here is receiving Tier 2 support in the area of letter, name, sound, knowledge, phonemic awareness, and from the CHIP kit from October 9th to January. So it's very detailed. And then also attached to that is the student's progress monitoring graph, all on the same page, instead of going in and out of all those platforms that I described earlier. And then that's the link to our programs and resources. I won't click on that now, but any questions? Yeah.
So this sounds as though it's very quick that you're able to assess, monitor the testing, unlike, say, 10 years ago, where you would take testing in the fall and not actually get the results until the spring and not really be able to act on it. It seems as though you're able to act on this quickly and adjust and assess?
Yeah, all of our platforms are pretty much immediate with the scores. Our local assessments, the state testing is a different story, but we do get those a little quicker than we used to. But yes, it's there. Teachers have, before they come to data meetings, teachers generally have looked at it beforehand, so the discussions go. So we're not sitting in a meeting just analyzing things that you haven't seen before, so they come prepared.
Again, just to highlight the key difference to how it was when we were all in school, or even 10, 15 years ago, is that teachers would sort of make a best guess, we call it cardiac assessment, how they felt, right? What it felt like to them the kid needed. You should hopefully feel like it's more scientific. We have data, we're analyzing, looking at trend lines, we're trying to figure out where the best improvements. If we don't see improvement, we move to do something different. If the kid does improve, then we move on to that group and do it. So like that work is being done all the time, right? With your staffs. And it's the benefit of the kids, but it's not just like what we feel about little Jimmy. This is like, it's a real deal. So it's kind of cool. It's very different than it used to be.
Yes, Chris. And kids are getting the right interventions early on, which is key. You may avoid a referral for special ed.
Any other questions?
Can I just ask, how many of our SUs? Let me answer. So, yes, I get very excited about this because as we look at this now, like, yes, it's in real time. Yeah. And we still hear the teacher input because that feedback about the classroom, about where that kid is that day and things like that are really important. But it's all this data together to be able to say, like, this is how we're going to help kids. And then our classroom teachers are like, well, what can I don't want to just have them go out. I want to understand what I'm supposed to do. And that's really the work we're doing. And Emily, this is cutting edge. This has been built by a really incredibly talented individual who, again, we piloted other things and he built this for us. And so it's been conversations over the last year and a half, probably, Renee, that we've been meeting with Samson about this, like building this thing to say, what do our teachers need to see so we can best help our students? So like when we talk about this in other districts, people are like, what? Say that again. So, okay, so I don't know that the answer is really zero, but I feel like it's a very small number.
They might be doing parts of it, but not all of us.
This goes in the category of how do we shout this from the rafters? All the great things that we're doing in this district, we just maybe better at it.
Yeah, you gotta be careful because if we shout, we're gonna get stuck in the district with every other state, and they'll all take the best and we must all understand.
We want to make sure every child in the state gets what they need.
That's what I do right here.
That's the outline.
We really have, and I begin to tell you a quick story. During Act 68, all these other different things we had, we actually, when we used to share, central office would hire a person to be a music teacher, and they would be fee for service. We'd go talk about that in other areas of the state. They look at us like we have three heads. I've always felt, I know Dan and Emily have been here longer than I have, but they, I always felt Windham Central should be the model for what we do throughout the rest of the state. Except we got to remember that we're kind of in northern Massachusetts and Vermont to start keeping up. So that's why I don't think they listen to us. I'm trying to keep this on time. We got less than 20 minutes, so I appreciate Jen. It was a great presentation in your group, and thank you. And I really get upset because sometimes the people that really need to see this are never going to see it. So it's really good, and I do hope we can get it out. Can we do like a 2-minute federal funding update?
Can we tie it into the whole question? Because I feel like it all kind of goes together.
Okay, so why don't we do then, let me do one thing quick. Dwight, you want to talk about Act 73 quick? You and Joe and Dan and Melissa were appointed as a small committee back in the summer. And Dwight was asked to chair the committee, and I think he's doing a really good job. And Unfortunately, Dan decided the VSBIT was not his cup of tea, so he stuck 20 down there, but we still have our 2 VSBA members, in Joe and our board members, Joe and White. So we do get some really good representation. We also still have Emily in the legislature. She's our last standing legislator on the board. But we really do get a lot of good representation from our area. And I think Bob and Leland and Greg, I know I saw Matt all the time on TV last week. You know, they did the presentation at the Leland and Greg gym, which was really good to have it in Windham Central. I know some of the legislators that aren't on the board anymore was there. A lot of your board members were. I got to watch it on TV. Of course, it's hard to miss Melissa's husband's baby, but a lot of good comments. And Dwight, you want to just kind of do a 2-minute, 3-minute?
Yeah, sure, happy to. It was a little surprising my name on the agenda, but yeah, I'm sure where that's soon. I'll just try to give a quick overview from what I've been learning and from the meetings I've been to of kind of where we are at, or where the legislature is at, and the task force is at with Act 73, and what it could mean for us if everything is implemented. Obviously, all you guys are aware, Act 73 is the law of the land right now, and what is taking place now is maps. That's what everyone's talking about, is maps. Because there's a task force that's been put together of 11 members, I believe, and their job is not an easy one, is to create a map. And as Rich likes to point out, Vermont's not as flat as it looks on a piece of paper. So their job is quite difficult to create. Their job is to create districts. And there's a whole bunch of kind of guardrails for that. They must have 4,000 students or close to it in each of those districts. And if those of you know, all of Windham County probably has less than 4,000 students. So that's what we're talking about if we talk about a district for our area. Would be most likely all of Windham County would consist of a district. And what that district would look like, it would either be with one large board if it was considered a supervisory district. The task force also can make it an SU like we are now, in which case we would have local school boards. So you can imagine being told that your district is going to have 4,000 students and have one board overseeing that whole area. It would be a massive change, right? I guess hopefully I'm telling you nothing you don't already know. So anyway, that's where we're at now. So just for timing, there were 4 meetings. There were going to be 4 meetings, informational meetings. One that was last week that Rick mentioned that we were all at, and I believe there's one tonight. Tomorrow night? Tonight, and then there's another one next week. So if you guys are interested in getting a little more information, I urge you to log on for that meeting. You can look on the website and just kind of see what they're talking about. At the meeting last week, I thought it was great. A lot of people got to speak. There were these breakout sessions where you could kind of be more one-on-one with some of the task force members. So I had an opportunity to speak with one, and it was funny. I told her where I was from, and she said, "Oh, I know you guys. Can't figure out where to put you." Oh, okay. It's like, you guys seem like you're not quite. It's River Valleys, right? And I said, well, our SU has got all kinds of different structures. We've got pretty much everything. So we are very unique, but we make it work, with all the different structures that we have. And so we kind of like it that way. And on more to that point, our River Valley district, we voted to encourage or to recommend that we stay in an SU structure. And some others have done that. Some other districts have made some recommendations based on their concerns. I urge all of you to talk about it amongst each other, amongst your boards, and even as an individual, to let them know what your concerns are going forward. And that's the task force I'm talking about now, but also the legislators, because the maps, as we all know, they get presented to the legislature, but that doesn't make them official. The legislature has to vote them in order to get past that stage. So anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell, I guess. But you guys are going to know more than me. I'm just kind of giving you an overview. So hopefully we'll get together too and talk about it a little bit more and see if there's anything direction that we want to take it as well. So that's pretty much what. Question, no, great.
I should mention that representatives from this SU and Windham Southeast, Windham Southwest, and Windham Northeast all got together. Joe was there.
Oh, good.
Sometime in the last few days. It was just a general discussion, but it was a very interesting one because this is groups of people who are all facing the same kind of stuff, trying to figure out if there's a common approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's the largest change in the structure of education, and there's no close second place. This is a massive change that's being presented. Does it mean it's going to happen? No, but it's certainly the opportunity is there through this bill, or through this law now, for some major changes. And the reasons are valid. I mean, the tax bills going up, school numbers are going down, so some change may have to happen. So. Any other questions that you may have, or anyone else want to bring something in? Okay, thank you, everyone.
So again, just to say how Windham Central leads the way, Emily and I, in between terms as chair, we wound up, remember we were meeting with Windham Southwest 18 years ago, looking at, and when Stephen John first came on, because he was from that area, we looked at some efficiencies we could do together too, and we were willing to move forward. It was really the other ones that didn't want to move with us. So again, this is not anything new. Just so you all know, in the 60s, there was going to be a super district. It was going to be Newfane and Dover and Brookline and Townsend. Dover looked at doing something with Marlboro for a while. Dover actually looked at combining with Wilmington and Whitingham to have the elementary school here, the middle school in Deerfield Valley Elementary, and Whitingham was going to be the high school. So there's always been some different talks and studies, but this one has some a lot of legislative support.
And one thing which I forgot to mention, so the December 1st is the deadline for the maps to be presented. Is that right? December 1st. Yeah.
There's been a few things though that had December deadlines, got extensions.
Yeah, I don't know if it's saying that.
But it's just
last we heard, that was it.
Their report is due.
Yeah.
So writing the report isn't going to take time.
I don't know, reports are tough.
They're working on it already.
I got a couple from high school. It's good thing I wrote the same for 1 year and reused them for 3 years. Heidi, you want to come on up?
Sure.
So you're gonna talk about end of the year federal funding update, and Jen, you were gonna be doing federal funding too.
Yeah, she doesn't know why her name was added to that. She
You
just
did
thinks
that
Bob
for just
Bob
nice.
did that to the next.
Just throw names around.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to do it.
Do you want to talk about the budget timeline first?
No, it's up to you, whatever you want us to do.
Okay, how about we dive right into budgets?
You're all set.
I'm all set, yeah. Everybody should have gotten a packet when they came in. If you didn't, it's up here. There's some documents that I'm going to refer to in the packet. I want to start by saying that Bob and I attended a Vermont Superintendent and Vermont Business Managers meeting a few weeks ago. It's a 2-day collaboration. It really centered around budgeting and being strategic. And one of the things that Bob and I came away from was really starting at a zero-based budget this year. There's a couple different ways you can go about budgeting. You can add in a certain percentage each year for increased costs and inflation, or as we're doing this year, it seemed like a good idea to sort of build from the ground up. So I just want to start that off by saying that, especially given the collaborations that are clearly going on in our office, the different departments that are really, looking for efficiencies and directors working together. So as we look at the finalizing of fiscal year 25, I just want you to keep that in mind. So the top page, fiscal year 25, WSU, general fund, revenue and expenses, and change in fund balance. So this is unaudited, however, I get to spend the whole week with auditors this week. It's really great. And so in a few months, I'll have these numbers confirmed. But I think there's a couple really important takeaways that I kind of work through on the next couple pages. But at the top of these fund balances, you'll find our general fund, which is the superintendent's budget. It includes the business office and the technology department. And it shows that we started with a fund balance, or we ended at fiscal year 24 with a fund balance. We worked with revenues coming in at 2.1 million and expenses that were 2.16, but we are ending with not much change, a little bit reduced. The board had made a decision because the previous business manager, Lori Garland, was retiring, and you as a board thought it would be a great idea for some overlap. So the board set aside $95,000 for that overlap, so both of us could be paid for the first 6 months of my position. And I'm happy to report that we did not need to use only half of that. So that was a savings. The MTSS, special ed, and academic support teachers, we started with a fund balance of 2.5 million. We had revenues of 6.6 million, expenses of 6.9 million, which is leaving us with 2.1 million. And this is really great news because this board made the decision when planning for this budget to set aside $800,000 of fund balance to help keep the cost down for the assessments that go on to all the school districts. And I'm happy to say that only $324,000 got used of that, which is really great news because it's keeping your fund balance pretty high, considering that we are using $1 million of it for this year's fund balance, this year's budget. The FFS agency fund is really a fee for service, and there's some staff that this SU pays for. It's an assessments because they go to multiple districts, so they're still in the SU budget. There's some transportation in there that for Windham, I believe, that we pay and we bill back for Windham. And so that started with 173,000. We had revenue for 785,000, expenses of 752,000, leaving us with 206,000, increase of 32,000 in that fund. The remaining funds on this page, most of them are grant funds, and you can take a look at that when you have time. It just shows where we sort of ended on 24, the funds that came in and go out. A lot of these funds, we get reimbursed back for our expenses and many grants, so it should end with a zero balance. And so we're doing quite well with the funding that we had. But if we turn to the next page, I just chose a few things, some of the highlights as I went through the fiscal year budget. I wanted to point out that our audit services have increased substantially. Our audit company has expanded and got more experienced auditors. They're doing single federal audits differently, and so our costs have increased substantially. So that's one thing that stands out. We had a security breach of staff records, unfortunately, and our insurance got involved and handled a lot of it, but we had to pay our deductible of $25,000, which was unanticipated. We had an overlap of an HR position of a few months, so there was some unexpected or unanticipated costs there. And the board chose to prepay copier leases to save on interest and those expenses in the coming years. So that was increased cost that was unbudgeted. Overall, we spent less than we budgeted, so that was fantastic. Again, only using up half of the fund balance that we had set aside for the general fund. We also had some reduced revenue, indirect funds, which is something that we get a percentage of on certain grants. And the government decides based on a very complicated formula that we fill out each year. And it came in much lower for 25 than it was in 24. So the budgeted amount was significantly over. So we did not get, we had a loss of 40,000 of that revenue. The assessments that we received from all your school districts was a little less because Windham did not end up having the school open. They tuitioned their students out, so we did not charge them for their tech assessment, obviously, because they did not need tech services. The good news is the interest has been doing great in the checking accounts, and we have made investments with treasury bonds and bills, which we ended up receiving 83,000 and had only budgeted 5,000 for interest, so that was certainly very helpful. And at the bottom, you'll see again, the total expenditure budget that you approved was 2.16, 2,165,000. The revenue we had was 2,122,000, and the use of the fund balance was 43,000. The next page is our MTSS multi-tiered systems of support budget. A quick overview of some of the expenses. We definitely had some areas where we were over the anticipated budgeted amount. ECSE, which is our early childhood education program expenses. We've had a lot of younger children needing more services in a very large geographic area, and that certainly had an impact on our budget for 25. Our TLC program expenses, I think, are reflecting the high needs of kids that are coming into our supervisory union, and that was definitely over budget. Again, I referenced the overlap of the HR position because some of it's in both of these budgets, since it helps with both programs, was a little over budget. However, we spent less in the special education tuition due to being able to use some IDEA funds, which was about 150, so that reduced it. And out of a budgeted 1.4 million for some of the special ed expenses, for those tuition, we only spent 1,089,000. So that was under budget overall of expenses by 214,000. I think I want to just point out that I think our special ed department does a great job, and while she was aware that we were overspending in some of these areas that had high needs, we were definitely trying to be fiscally responsible and finding areas that we could offset those expenses. And I think that shows how well this came out. The revenue, there was 2 places where I really found significant differences, or some differences. The state grant for the ECSE was about 6,000 more than we had thought it would be. And then extraordinary special ed costs. For those that aren't aware, when we have outside placements, the costs can be really significantly high. And so currently special ed allows for anything over 67,000 that will get 95% reimbursement back. So I think it shows there's a high need for significant special ed services, because we overall got back $644,000. That's a lot of money that we're paying for kids with significant needs at outside placements. And I have to say, in Southern Vermont, there's not a lot of places to go for kids with those needs. So between that and state placed, we brought in a lot more, about 250,000 more than we expected. Yes, Roddy?
When we spend money, let's say we have a child with intensive needs, we spend money to send them to an independent school that can serve their needs. We get 95% reimbursement. We make the choice to work with those needs within our school system, like the TLC. Do we get that same type of reimbursement?
So we calculate that every year, and we can use the costs of salaries of the people that are in the TLC program. We can use a percentage of the building costs. And if we can get it down, when we get it down to the per pupil costs of those kids, if it's over 67,000, we can apply those to the extraordinary.
That's great. That's
And just to be clear, you only get the 95% for the above the 60.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I get it, but it doesn't hurt us to keep them in.
Right.
Yes, yes. I would say that that's fairly accurate. And so again, expenditures, we had 6.9 million, revenue 6.6 million. So we only used 324,000 of the 800,000 approved and are able to retain fund balance of just under 500,000, 450,000. So the next page is just where we currently are in our current fiscal year. And we're through the first quarter. There's not a lot to report except that I feel looking at these numbers, and these are expenditures that are encumbered in my financial system as well as some expenses we've paid. It shows that I think we're right on track. We are using up a good chunk of the $1 million that was set aside as of right now for the MTSS budget, but everything looks as it should be. And so we'll continue to carefully watch our budget and hope we don't have any significant changes that are going to impact. We still have all of these grants that are listed that I took out some of the ESSER funds in this one because those are all gone. These are currently our federal funds. However, getting to the federal fund update is a little stressful. You know, I think it's safe to say, given the status of the federal government right now and what's coming out, that we are not going to have Title II and Title IV funds next year. I was on an AOE meeting the other day. We were talking about Title I funds. We expect to have Title I funds. However, it's anybody's guess. We are looking at the poverty levels because poverty levels do impact the Title I funds. Title I funds are really about helping, the use of those funds are to help the achievement of students, intervention, those types of needs. And so when you look, the AOE, the federal government, I should say, takes the census, looks at the census 2 years ago, I think, those numbers are what the set that they take. They determine how much Vermont gets in title funds as compared to the whole country. And then Vermont looks at our individual poverty levels of all the school districts and supervisory unions. They have a formula, and then they figure out how much you get. If the federal government sticks to its current funding formula, you know, I expect we'll get some, but I also think our poverty levels have gone down with our enrollment numbers. So I'm working with Samson, again, an amazing IT guy. He's working with the AOE, making sure our data is correct as we submit that this month to determine our long-term weighted ADM numbers and also determine our poverty numbers so that we can keep an eye on that. So I'm hopeful, but what I can tell you is that I know we're probably going to have about 360,000 less in grants for sure next year, could be more. So I come back around to why the collaboration that's happening in the SU is important and why starting with a zero-based budget this year is really important. We're trying, between Jen and Bob and myself, to really analyze the data, analyze our programs, analyze everything from the ground up. We want to make sure that students are centered in all the decisions we make. We recognize, though, that local budgets may have to take on a little more of the expenses depending on what the needs of our students are. But we're trying to be able to bring you a budget this year that is very thoughtful. I mean, I want to say that a budget that's brought to you every year is always thoughtful because there's not a lot of fluff in our budgets, but we are really trying to look for efficiencies and really trying to find anything we can, but to keep what the kids need. And as I showed you in special ed, there's a lot of needs in our school district, in our supervisory union. So
We're gonna resell these.
Yes, right, exactly. $5. You want to start auctioning?
No.
So-
25 bucks.
25, okay. So the last page that I wanted to add just to this, for informational purposes, we did this in the office to give out to all the schools because there have been some change of faces in the last couple of years, and not everybody sees the business office. They see all the other staff of the SU because they're in and out of buildings, but people don't always know who to go to. And I think it's really important for you to see, for everybody to know who these people are, what they do. And honestly, this could have been twice as long. These lists of jobs that everybody does in our office, it doesn't even begin to hit everything that happens. Everybody is working super hard because we're all trying to make this SU work and function as best as it can, with collaboration and making sure people get paid and paying the bills and being thoughtful. So, you know, I wanted you to just take some time when you have time, look at through who these people are, some of the work that they're doing on behalf of all of you. So that's what that's there for. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Heidi, I've got a comment. I'd like to thank Heidi. This is really the first full year in a row, and your confidence and your presentation is wonderful tonight.
Oh, thank you, Rich.
And you're doing a great job for us. And I want to say not only just on giving us a tight budget, but one thing, you know, there's a couple theories when you're in the public, eat in the public trough, and you work for the public is, I can't get more money next year if I don't spend all the money this year or spend more. And Windham Central has always been really good in the business office and our superintendent, our administrators, and our building principals to, you know, even though I got in the budget, doesn't mean it has to be spent. You know, if we'll spend what we need to do the job, but, you know, if you can save a little, that gives us a little boost maybe next year. And, you know, her predecessor was great at that. And Heidi's picked up, you know, really a lot of great, those great.
Yeah, she was a good mentor.
In the habits, and, you know, like she said, there was $300,000 unaudited last year that's not being spent, so that helps us money this year that we can spend. And again, just because it's there doesn't mean we got to spend it. So you guys do a great job. So I'd like to really give her a hand.
Big spender.
So if we would like to just look at a timeline for presenting, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody else has some questions or comments, I'm happy to take it all in. Can't always answer every question. I'm still learning. Every day I learn some more. I learned a lot from the auditors today. Yes, Dan.
Just a tidbit that I think you threw out that the percentage of students in poverty is actually decreasing as we have fewer students. Not the number, but the percentage is increasing.
From my initial look, and I was looking at that today based on what Samson was giving me, in our CFP application that we're running out of our title grants this year, our numbers are quite high, and that's based on last fall. And right now our numbers, rather than in the 80s, are coming back in the 40s and 50s. So we need to do some digging, but I have to say, Samson has been instrumental. I can't say how many times we've said this, but he is amazing. But when we stopped having free and reduced lunch, people stopped filling out forms about income. And last year we had the household income form, but we got it out there late because we really didn't know how we're supposed to be handling that. And not many people filled it out. This year, it was right there, electronically, paper copies at the beginning of the year. And he has reported to me that the amount of people that filled it out is huge compared to what the information we've been getting. So I feel confident that the information we're compiling this year is going to be strong. But I am worried because the numbers have gone down and his initial review of those numbers doesn't look as strong as it has been. But again, we're in the beginning stages, so I'm hoping we're going to find some extra, but we review direct serve, Medicaid numbers and household income, and that's what the state uses, and we are double checking all the state's figures as we go. So.
Great, thanks.
I'd love to see what numbers would be fast, because totally anecdotal, if food shelf use is any indicator, barometer, we are worse off than we ever were.
But so the difference is that it's got to be kids in the schools, right? I mean, I'm assuming we're seeing plenty of families that way, but I'm just saying any community people that don't have kids in the school, they're not counted in that determination. So we are definitely going to look very closely at that, because that matters significantly. And it certainly looks like our families are struggling every single day, so.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes, did you want to talk about the
No, if you don't mind. So there's a timeline in there. It's pretty much the same thing we've been doing forever.
Perfect.
It just, try to get perspective.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm going to skip around a little bit. Can I get a motion from somebody to approve the minutes of the 5/28/25 meeting, the special meeting on July 30th, and the special meeting of 9/15? 9:30 was to discuss the act, and 9:15 was to just approve the contract. Okay, so Kate moved to approve the minutes as written from 5/28/25, the special 7/30/25 meeting, and the special 9/15 meeting. Is there a second to that? Thank you. Melissa, sorry, I was gonna say Heather. And so there's a motion, a second. Is there any discussion? Who is on the school board too? Sisters on school boards. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Appears to be unanimous decision in the affirmative. It is. We had district updates. Dan, I want to pick on you if I could, and I know we're going to run a little bit late, but we've got, your district is going through some huge changes. You want to just do a quick overview and talk about it? And if you don't, that's fine too, I understand.
Yeah, I feel like we should, because what's happening to us is probably going to be happening to a lot more schools, not only with what's happening to us, to Marlboro right now is independent of Act 73. The numbers are declining, and we just don't know how many kids we're going to have and if we're going to be able to pass a budget. So the school board faces the issue of what kind of budget do you try to put up to the voters and see if they'll pass, or do you decide to close the school and become a non-operating town like Stratton and Windham are now? So, I mean, it's kind of like Act 73 gave us all this kind of shudder, like this could happen to every single school board member in the room, except that it's happening to us before Act 73 is making it happen. So we're having the conversation now. I think my own personal feeling is that we have to be most respectful of the people who work in the school. This was, Act 73 came about, forgive my cynicism here, as a sort of a taxpayer revolt. We got to cut taxes. We got to make education taxes get less and less and less, and not so much about the kids or the people who teach in the schools. So we may be lucky that we can precede Act 73's authority and make a decision on our own that is respectful of the staff and the students and also the people who struggle to pay the taxes. I don't know. What else can you say?
And I've got on Dan, Dan, when I became chairman of Windham Central right after Linda had gotten done, we celebrated, I went to Marlboro with Jim Peters, the assistant superintendent, to present Dan a plaque because he had like 25 years on the Marlboro School Board and he retired from the school board. And now when we were going through Act, 65 and a half, Dan got back on and he went back up because it was an important time in the town and he's been there ever since. So what do you got, 40 years total?
I have no idea.
A lot of years. And Dan lived and bled in Marlboro. Dan is a true Marlboroite. Your children, your grandchildren, and you know, he expected his great grandchildren. And
I went to the school, my kids went to the school, and my grandkids now are mostly out of it. Same school, same, and you know, to be fair, it's a cruddy little school in a cruddy place, so you know, you can't be too sentimental about it. Yeah.
There you go.
The building itself.
the building's rough, it's a great record. And Dan, that had to hurt to say that, didn't it? Just real quick, Peter, can you just say hi real quick, because I saw you sneaking late?
Yeah, hi, I'm Peter. I'm the, what's the word, secretary? No. Clerk, that's it, of the Westboro Education District Board.
Thank you. And Al, we missed you too, you got to sneak in.
Yeah.
We introduced ourselves.
Al Watson, clerk of WCSU board and vice chair for Westboro.
And there was a method to my madness. I went to you second because Drew isn't here. Do you have any, you want to do anything important at Leland Gray? I guess the boys didn't have a good soccer game.
No, lost 2-1 to Sherry Academy, so tough loss.
You got nothing going on, you're not building a new school or anything?
We keep trying.
I know.
We're breaking ground any day now.
Governor's coming to the show.
There you go. Next. Are you all set though? There's nothing. Windham, we used to get a lot of participation from Windham, not so much lately. It's good to see somebody from Windham. I know you guys are going through some stuff with your building and the town. You're trying to give it to the town or do something.
Yep, there's some discussion about selling our school to the town as a public building and how to use that. There's a lot of opinions about how that's going to look, and so those are getting grinded in. But that will ultimately, the school board's already moved to sell that to the town, so that's been a lot of logistics. We're talking about transportation. We're writing a letter to the task force, which we're a little late on, but we're getting there. And in a lot of ways, what's been interesting is I put out a poll about what folks wanted to see in the letter, and it's kind of got to reaffirm what was important to our town, and choice was still a really important issue, although not necessarily from parents in the town. When we looked at who voted on that, there was a lot of just taxpayers who didn't have kids in the district. But I thought that was curious. I don't have an opinion on it, but it reaffirmed that, you know, Windham is a mountain town with really big heart. And so, yeah, along with transportation and everything else. And so this is my first time being here. I left in March, so thank you for having me. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. It's really good. We used to, like I said, when Carolyn was there, we used to get a lot of people every time. Everyone was always there, and it's kind of, you guys have had a lot of things to deal with. I'm glad to have you here. Ms. Walker, and up in the other mountain town, on the other side of the district.
We're just working hard at making our opinions known to the task force and just trying to stay up. What's going on?
And we've had great participation with your predecessor coming to a lot of meetings, and thank you for stepping into that because that's a tough position, and I hope she's doing well and things are going well for her. We definitely miss her too. And last but not least, I think is right. We got everybody but River Valleys, and because I talk so much, I'm getting bad at it. I'm going to go to our extraordinarily talented vice chair.
So River Valleys, we are very fortunate to have Dwight on board and his expertise, because Dwight is really leaning into understanding Act 7-3 and leading us through this new era of life. We are also focused in on paying attention to our numbers because, like Marlboro, we are seeing a trend in dipping with numbers, and we're trying to think about what that looks like for our community and our buildings and our schools, because we operate 2 elementary schools that serves pre-K 3 to 6th grade, and both of those schools are really awesome little places that do some really cool things. The Door School does some great programs for their kids, and Northborough's had circus with Troy Weatherly experience. Yeah, so it's really great things. But on the board level, we're focused in on the future and seeing how we can keep our mountain town full of heart too. So,
no, you did a great job. Thank you. And I want to recognize one more person before I give it to Bob to close us out. Scotty, I think the world of you. I'm so glad to see you here every time you come to our meetings. And I think now, aren't you the senior most principal in the district?
When I started 12 years ago, I was the youngest person on the leadership team. And that was 12 years ago. Now I'm the oldest. So it really is amazing how it works. Well, enough about me.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the administrators. Thank you for all the central office staff. I'm going to let Bob close the meeting out. Because I got a call from him, but Bob can.
Yeah. So just want to say thank you again for everybody who came. I want to thank Greg and Jake, Don, and Kathleen for putting on a great meal, and for Tracy for hosting us. All the work that went into that, and special thanks to Nicole for helping get everything organized for all of it. Yeah, I think it was a great retreat, and I hope it was informative for you guys. I will resend out the slide deck. It is attached to the agenda, but I will resend it out separately, so to all board members, so you guys can take a look at that. Feel free to ask questions, poke around, be well informed, so as budget season rolls in, you'll know, when people ask questions, you'll know what the answer. And again, you're great for me, and I'm forever honored to be doing this job and serving the kids and staff and the communities in Windham Central. So, long live Windham Central.
Bob signed a contract with us for 198 years. Can I get our next meeting is a budget meeting, November 20th. It will probably be in Leland Gray. Please pay attention when Heidi sends out the budget documents too, because we do have to get the budget approved for Windham Central, because some other towns that meet in March need to have that information for their budget. So the most important motion that's ever made in any school board meeting. And is there a second? Thank you, there's a second. And it cannot be debated, it just gets voted on. So all those in favor say aye. Thank you, everybody.